The granite headstone stood like a sentinel against the Virginia sky, gray stone catching the late afternoon light of October 2022. Master Chief Jack Mercer stood at parade rest before it, shoulders square, despite the arthritis creeping through his spine, despite the shrapnel embedded in his left knee from a firefight in Grenada nearly 40 years ago. 62 years old, 40 years of service. And still, after all this time, he could not look at this grave without feeling the weight of failure pressing against his chest like a boot. The inscription was simple, carved with military precision. Master Chief Cole Hartwell, United States Navy SEAL, 1970 to 2011. Beloved father and brother in arms. Above it, the SEAL trident gleamed in bronze, that ancient symbol of warriors who came from the sea. But the stone said nothing about how Cole died. Nothing about the lie that had been carved into official records, repeated in after-action reports, whispered in ready rooms and memorial services for 11 years. Killed in action, IED explosion, Taliban ambush, honorable death. Jack knew better. The wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of freshly cut grass and the distant echo of a bugler practicing taps somewhere across Arlington's endless rows of white markers. Each stone represented a life given, a family shattered, a brother lost. But how many of them, Jack wondered, had been murdered by their own? How many had died not fighting America's enemies, but betrayed by the men who wore the same uniform? He reached into his jacket pocket, fingers finding the cold metal of dog tags. Not his own. These belonged to Bruno, Cole's canine partner. German Shepherd, 85 pounds of muscle and loyalty, an instinct honed by thousands of hours of training. Bruno had died 3 days after Cole, put down by a veterinarian at Bagram Airfield. Injuries from the blast, they said. Too severe to treat, merciful to end his suffering. Another lie. Jack had seen the vet report. Bruno's injuries were superficial. Burns, lacerations, but nothing that would require euthanasia. The dog was killed because he was a witness. Because German Shepherds, unlike men, cannot be threatened or bribed or broken by lawyers in classified briefings and national security protocols. Bruno knew what happened that day on Route Delta in Kandahar province. Bruno smelled the truth on the men who murdered his handler, so they silenced him too. Jack placed the dog tags against the base of the headstone, metal clinking softly against stone. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the quiet cemetery, a small defiance against the vast silence of the dead. He straightened, snapped to attention, raised his right hand in a salute that he held for a full 30 seconds. Not the perfunctory gesture of obligation, but the kind of salute that said, "I have not forgotten. I will never forget. I am still fighting." When he lowered his hand, his fingers were trembling. Not from age, from rage. Footsteps approached from behind, light and measured, the gait of someone trained to move quietly. Jack did not turn. He knew that walk, had trained it himself, corrected the foot placement, adjusted the weight distribution, turned a grieving 19-year-old girl into a warrior who could move through hostile territory like smoke. Ava Hartwell stopped beside him, close enough that he could see her in his peripheral vision. 28 years old now, dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun, eyes the same storm gray as her father's. She wore civilian clothes, jeans and a leather jacket, but she carried herself with the rigid posture of active duty. Staff Sergeant, Marine Corps K-9 handler, following in her father's footsteps, walking the same dangerous path that had gotten him killed. She did not speak for a long moment, just stood there shoulder to shoulder with him. Two soldiers at a grave, bound by blood and grief and something darker. Something that had been growing between them for 11 years, fed by questions without answers, by official reports that made no sense, by the careful silence of men who knew more than they would say. Finally, she broke the silence. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the edge of tempered steel. Uncle Jack. He had never been her uncle by blood, and onquas. Cole had no brothers, but in the SEAL teams, in the tight brotherhood of men who jumped out of airplanes and breached doors and dragged each other out of kill zones, the bonds went deeper than DNA. Jack had been at Cole's wedding, had held baby Ava in the delivery room when Cole was deployed to Bosnia, had taught her to swim, to shoot, to track, to read the subtle body language of dogs that most handlers missed. After Cole died, after the funeral with its folded flag and rifle volleys and lies, Jack had tried to be there for her, tried to fill the hole that losing a father tears into a child's world. But Ava had not wanted comfort. She had wanted answers. And Jack, bound by chains of classified information and threatened consequences and his own cowardice, had failed her. He turned to face her now. She had her father's eyes, but there was something harder in them, something that had not been there when she was younger. Combat does that, puts a weight behind the gaze, a knowledge of what humans are capable of inflicting on each other. "You look tired," she said. "So do you." It was true. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her skin had the pale quality of someone who spent too much time awake, staring at ceilings, replaying memories. PTSD, probably. Most handlers had it. You bond with a bomb, train with it, trust it with your life, and then one day it steps on an IED or takes a bullet meant for you or just grows old and dies. And you are left with a hole shaped like absolute loyalty that nothing else can fill. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a package, wrapped in brown paper, bound with string. The paper was old, yellowed at the edges, marked with the kind of careful handling that said this has been moved many times, stored in many places, carried like a sacred relic. "Mom died 3 weeks ago," Ava said. Her voice did not break, but Jack heard the crack in it anyway. The fault line of grief held barely in check. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. By the time they found it, she had maybe 3 months. She lasted 2. Jack felt the words hit him like a punch. Sarah Hartwell, Cole's widow, the woman who had buried her husband at 43, who had raised their daughter alone, who had smiled at Jack every Thanksgiving and Christmas, even though they both knew he could have done more, should have said more, should have fought harder to expose the truth. "I did not know," Jack said. His voice sounded hollow even to himself. "I should have called, should have visited." Ava shook her head. She did not want people to know, did not want the pity, the casseroles, the empty condolences. You know how she was, private, strong. She held out the package. "Before she died, she gave me this. Said Dad left it for me. Said she found it in his personal effects after the funeral, sealed in plastic, marked with my name. She kept it all these years, waiting until I was ready." Jack took the package. It was heavier than it looked. Not the weight of paper, but the weight of secrets, of truth compressed into pages and ink. He turned it over in his hands, saw Cole's handwriting on the front, precise block letters, the kind taught in military schools, designed to be readable in any condition. "For Ava, if I do not come home." "Open it," Ava said, "please." Jack untied the string with fingers that felt too thick, too clumsy. The brown paper fell away, revealing a leather-bound journal, the kind with unlined pages, the kind artists and poets use. But this was not filled with sketches or verse. Jack opened the cover and saw pages dense with handwriting, interspersed with diagrams, coordinates, names, dates. And beneath it all, a structure, a cipher, a code. His breath caught. He recognized this encryption, had used it himself decades ago in operations that officially never happened, in places the United States officially never went. It was a hybrid system, part military shorthand, part substitution cipher, part context-dependent code that required the reader to know not just the key, but the shared experiences, the inside references, the private language that develops between brothers in arms. Only someone who had served with Cole, who had trained with him, who had bled with him, could read this. Jack flipped through the pages, saw entries dating back years: Afghanistan, Iraq, Kuwait, training rotations stateside. And running through it all, a thread, a pattern, names circled, dates highlighted, financial figures, coordinates of meetings that should not have happened, photographs paper-clipped to pages, showing men in uniform standing together in places they had no reason to be. His hands began to shake. Ava watched him, her gray eyes measuring his reaction. "You can read it," she said. It was not a question. Jack closed the journal, held it against his chest like a shield. "When did your mother give you this?" 2 days before she died, she was in hospice, barely conscious. But she grabbed my hand, put this in it, and said, "Finish what your father started." Then she closed her eyes and never woke up again. The cemetery was empty now. The sun had dropped below the tree line, casting long shadows across the endless rows of graves. Somewhere a groundskeeper was locking gates, securing the dead for another night. Jack looked at Cole's headstone, at the dates that bracketed a life cut short, at the lie carved in stone. "I need to tell you something," Jack said. "And once I start, there is no going back. You will know things that will put you in danger, things that will make you a target, things that will change how you see everyone you have ever trusted." Ava's expression did not change. "Good, I'm done trusting." Jack took a breath. "Let me start at the beginning." 6 months earlier, Jack had still been on active duty. 62 years old, well past the age when most warriors hung up their gear and retired to golf courses and grandchildren. But Jack had no grandchildren. No children at all. His marriage had ended 20 years ago, dissolved by deployments and secrets and the slow erosion of intimacy that happens when one person lives in the world and the other lives in shadows. He had the Navy, he had the K-9 program, and he had his obsession. For 11 years since the day Cole died, Jack had been investigating. Quietly, carefully. In the margins of his official duties, using access and relationships built over 4 decades of service. He had filed Freedom of Information Act requests that were denied on grounds of national security. He had questioned men who had been on that patrol, only to find their stories perfectly aligned, rehearsed, scrubbed clean of inconsistency. He had tried to access classified after action reports, tried to pull the footage from helmet cameras, tried to get autopsy records that went beyond the sanitized summary released to families. Every door had been locked, every file sealed, every witness silent. And every time Jack pushed harder, asked louder, demanded answers with the righteous fury of someone who knows his brother was murdered, the system pushed back. Reprimands appeared in his file. His security clearance was reviewed, his fitness for duty questioned. Whispers started in ready rooms. Jackson Mercer is losing it. Obsessed. Cannot let go. Needs to retire before he becomes a liability. The final blow came in March of 2022. Admiral Frank Garrison summoned Jack to his office at Naval Special Warfare Command. The office was on the 3rd floor of a building that looked like every other military admin building, concrete and glass, and the faint smell of floor wax and old coffee. But this office had a view of the Pacific, that endless gray expanse that had defined Jack's life, that had carried him to wars and brought him home broken and sent him out again, because that is what warriors do. They go, they fight, they come back, and they go again. Garrison was 64 years old, 2 years older than Jack, but he looked younger. The kind of aging that comes with rank and privilege, and a life lived mostly in air-conditioned offices rather than in deserts and jungles. He wore his dress whites, the uniform crisp and perfect, chest heavy with ribbons accumulated over 42 years of service. Grenada, Panama, Gulf War, Somalia, Afghanistan, Iraq. A career that read like a history of American military intervention since the Cold War ended. Jack had known Garrison since Bud/S training in 1982. They had been in the same class, had endured Hell Week together, had graduated and been assigned to SEAL Team 3 together. They had jumped out of airplanes together, breached doors together, carried each other out of firefights together. Brothers. That word again. That bond that was supposed to be unbreakable. But something had broken. Jack had felt it years ago, seen it in the way Garrison looked at him after Cole died, in the careful distance Garrison maintained, in the way he changed the subject whenever Jack tried to talk about inconsistencies in the official report. Garrison did not stand when Jack entered, did not offer the informal ease of old friends. He sat behind his desk, fingers steepled, and looked at Jack with the cold assessment of a superior officer evaluating a problem. "Close the door," Garrison said. Jack closed it, remained standing. Parade rest, hands clasped behind his back, eyes forward, the posture of subordination, of rank and order, in the chain of command that held military life together. Garrison studied him for a long moment, finally spoke. "Jack, we need to talk about your retirement." "I am not retiring, sir. I have 2 more years before mandatory separation." Garrison picked up a folder from his desk, opened it, began reading. December 2020. You accessed classified files related to Operation Enduring Freedom without proper authorization. March 2021. You were reprimanded for questioning Lieutenant Commander Stone during an official briefing about patrol protocols in Kandahar. September 2021. You filed your 7th FOIA request regarding Cole Hartwell's death, all of which were denied on national security grounds. January 2022. You were observed photographing Admiral's Row, specifically my personal vehicle. He closed the folder, looked up. You have spent 11 years investigating a closed case. A case that was reviewed by JAG, by NCIS, by 3 separate boards of inquiry, all of which reached the same conclusion. Master Chief Cole Hartwell was killed in action by an IED planted by Taliban forces. His death was tragic. It was also combat. It happens. Jack's jaw tightened. The shrapnel in his knee throbbed. He forced his voice to remain level, professional, empty of the rage burning through his veins. Sir, there are inconsistencies in the official report. There are always inconsistencies, Garrison said. Combat is chaos. Reports are written by exhausted men under stress. You know this. The autopsy report states Cole died from an IED blast, but his injuries are inconsistent with explosive trauma. He had a single stab wound to the chest. The report mentions it, then dismisses it as shrapnel. Garrison's expression did not change. Shrapnel can cause wounds that resemble stab marks. Again, you know this. Not with that precision, not angled upward beneath the rib cage directly into the heart. That is a combat knife. That is close quarters. That is murder. The word hung in the air between them. Murder. The accusation that Jack had been building toward for 11 years, that he had whispered to himself in the dark, that he had carried like a stone in his chest. Garrison stood, walked to the window, looked out at the Pacific, hands clasped behind his back, mirroring Jack's posture. When he spoke, his voice was softer, almost gentle. Jack, I loved Cole too. We all did. He was one of the best. But you are destroying yourself chasing ghosts. You have given 40 years to this country. You have earned your rest. Take it. Jack said nothing. Garrison turned. His eyes were hard now, the gentleness gone. This is not a request. You will retire. Effective immediately. I have prepared the paperwork. Sign it or I will convene a board to review your fitness for duty. And I promise you, that board will not rule in your favor. You will be dishonorably discharged, lose your pension, lose your benefits, and spend your final years fighting legal battles you cannot win. He slid a document across the desk, retirement papers. All that was needed was Jack's signature. Jack looked at the papers, at the man who had once been his brother, at the threat barely disguised as concern. He signed, because that is what you do when you are 62 years old and you have no allies left and the system is rigged against you. You sign, you salute, you walk away, and you wait. But you do not stop. After he left Garrison's office, after he cleaned out his locker and turned in his credentials and drove away from the base for the last time, Jack went to a self-storage facility in El Cajon, a dusty suburb east of San Diego, where strip malls and taco shops stretched toward desert hills. He rented Unit 237 under a fake name, paid cash for 2 years in advance, and spent the next 3 months moving his investigation out of official channels and into the shadows. The storage unit became his operations center. He lined the walls with maps, taped up photographs, strung yarn between pins, creating webs of connection that only he could read. He had files on 5 men, 5 SEALs who had been in the right place, at the right time, with the right access and the right motivation to murder Cole Hartwell and cover it up. Admiral Frank Garrison, the architect, the man with the rank and the connections and the authority to bury investigations and threaten witnesses and make evidence disappear. Command Master Chief Marcus Kane, the enforcer, Cole's former platoon sergeant, the man who had been on that patrol, who had been close enough to plant the IED, close enough to finish Cole with a knife if the explosion failed to kill him. Senior Chief Derek Stone, the logistician, the man who planned operations, who controlled supply lines, who could make equipment and money and people move through channels, official and otherwise. And 2 more, unknown. Names Cole had hinted at in conversations, initials that appeared in notes, shadows moving at the edges of Jack's investigation. He had suspects, possibilities, but nothing concrete. Not yet. The evidence was circumstantial. Suspicious meetings, financial irregularities, travel records that did not match official orders. Photographs Jack had taken over 11 years, documenting patterns that meant nothing individually, but together suggested something darker. An operation, a conspiracy, a betrayal that had been running for decades, that had made these men rich while others died believing they were serving their country. Jack sat in that storage unit on the night after he retired, surrounded by his obsession and he played an old cassette tape. The audio was scratched, degraded by time and repeated listening, but Cole's voice was still clear, still alive. The recording was from October 2011, 2 days before Cole died. Cole's voice, steady and calm, the voice of a man who knows he is walking toward danger but refuses to run. Jack, if you are hearing this, I am dead. A pause, the sound of breathing, the rustle of fabric. Cole was in his quarters probably. Kabul or Kandahar, one of the forward operating bases where SEALs staged before missions into the mountains. I have been investigating something bad, worse than I thought. There is an operation running out of JSOC, has been running since the Gulf War. Weapons, equipment, sensitive material. They are selling it, not to allies, to anyone who pays. Another pause, longer this time. Cole was choosing his words carefully, knowing this tape might be all that survived him. I have identified 5 members. Code names. Sentinel, that is Garrison, I am sure of it. Viper, I think that is Kane. Ghost, Stone, definitely Stone. And 2 more, Reaper and Shepherd. I do not have real names yet, but I will. The sound of a door opening, voices in the background, Cole lowering his voice to a whisper. They know I know. I have seen the way they look at me, the way they change subjects when I enter a room. They are going to move against me, soon. Tomorrow's patrol, Route Delta. It feels wrong, too convenient, too perfect. A long breath, then Cole's voice, harder now, determined. I gave Kane a copy of everything, financial records, photos, recordings. If something happens to me, he has it. He will know what to do. And Jack, I need you to trust me on this. Even if you think I am paranoid, even if the evidence seems thin, trust the dogs. They know who the wolves are. A knock on the door. Cole's voice, louder now, casual. Yeah, coming. Then so quietly Jack had to strain to hear it. Tell Ava I love her. The recording ended. Jack sat in the dark storage unit, listening to the silence after his brother's voice cut off, listening to the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant traffic on the interstate and his own breathing. He had not believed Cole, not fully, not enough. When Cole had come to him 3 days before that patrol, when he had laid out his suspicions, shown Jack the beginnings of his evidence, asked for backup, for support, for someone to stand with him when he took this to Jag, Jack had hesitated, had said they needed more proof, had said they needed to be careful, to think this through, to not blow their careers on a conspiracy theory. And Cole had gone ahead anyway, because that was who Cole Hartwell was, the kind of man who saw wrong and refused to stay silent, even if silence would have saved him. 3 days later, Cole was dead, and Jack had spent 11 years living with the knowledge that his caution, his cowardice, had killed his brother as surely as the knife that pierced his heart. Now standing in Arlington National Cemetery with Cole's journal in his hands and Ava waiting for answers, Jack made a different choice. I need to show you something, he said. They drove to El Cajon in Jack's truck, a battered Ford Ranger that smelled of gun oil and old coffee and the particular staleness of a vehicle owned by someone who lives alone. Ava sat in the passenger seat, silent, Cole's journal open on her lap. She was trying to read it, her finger tracing lines of encrypted text, her brow furrowed in concentration. Can you read any of it? Jack asked. Some. Dad taught me basic field codes. But this is more complex, layered. It will take time. But yes, I can read it. He meant for me to read it. Jack glanced at her. Cole knew. He knew they were going to kill him. He prepared for it. Ava closed the journal, held it against her chest the same way Jack had earlier. Her voice was quiet but fierce. Then we finished what he started. The storage facility was a warren of identical orange doors stretching in rows beneath harsh sodium lights. Jack parked, led Ava to Unit 237, unlocked the rolling door, and pulled it up with a metallic shriek that echoed off concrete walls. Ava stepped inside, stopped. The unit was a shrine to obsession. Every wall covered with maps, photographs, documents, red yarn connecting faces to places, dates to events, money to names. In the center of the room, a folding table held 3 laptops, all running, all displaying different data. Financial records, flight manifests, service records pulled from databases Jack should not have been able to access. Ava turned slowly, taking it all in. Her eyes moved from wall to wall, reading the story Jack had built piece by piece over 11 years. When she completed her rotation, when she looked at him again, there were tears on her face. You never stopped, she said. All these years, you never stopped looking. Jack's throat tightened. He had failed Cole, had failed Ava, had failed himself, but he had not stopped. That was something, maybe not enough, but something. I found this, Ava said. She opened Cole's journal to a marked page, handed it to Jack. Bottom of the page, last entry. Jack took the journal. The handwriting was rushed here, less careful. The entry was dated October 14th, 2011. One day before Cole died. Final entry before mission. Tomorrow we patrol Route Delta. Standard sweep. But I have a bad feeling. Kane volunteered to ride in my vehicle. Never done that before. Garrison personally selected the route. Also unusual. Jack's pulse quickened as he read. I have informed TK of my suspicions. Gave him a copy of all evidence. USB drive, hidden in his gear. If I do not return, he knows what to do. TK, Thaddeus Kane, Master Chief, Jack's mentor. The man who had trained both Jack and Cole, who had been their squad leader in Grenada, who had taught them everything they knew about being SEALs, about brotherhood, about what it meant to be warriors. Kane, still alive, still out there. The entry continued. To Ava, if you are reading in this, I am gone. I am sorry I will not be there to teach you, protect you, watch you grow into the woman I know you will become. But you are strong, stronger than you know. Finish what I started. Expose the vipers. Protect the pack. Trust the dogs. They know who the wolves are. I love you, baby girl. Always and forever, Dad. Ava took the journal back, her fingers trembling. Where is Kane? Jack crossed to one of the laptops, pulled up a file. Master Chief Thaddeus Kane, retired 2012. Disability discharge. Currently residing in Portland, Oregon. VA hospital, long-term care facility. What happened to him? Jack pulled up another file. Incident report from April 2012. Kane was assaulted in a parking garage. 2 men unknown. They beat him severely, pushed him down a concrete stairwell. Spinal cord injury at L3/L4. Paralyzed from the waist down. Ava's face went pale. They tried to kill him. No, Jack's voice was hard. If they wanted him dead, he would be dead. This was a message. This was punishment. They crippled him, made him live with it, made him watch and remember and know that if he talks, next time they will not leave him breathing. Ava looked at the photographs on the wall, at Garrison in his Admiral's uniform, at Kane with his Command Master Chief anchors, at Stone and the 2 unknowns, faces circled in red, question marks beside their names. We are going to see Kane, she said, tonight. Jack shook his head. Portland is 8 hours north, and Kane has lived in fear for 11 years. He will not talk easily. Then we make him talk. Ava's gray eyes were steel now, her father's determination burning through. Because I am done waiting. I am done being patient. They killed my father. They crippled your friend. And they have been walking free for 11 years, getting rich, getting promoted, sleeping soundly while we carry their sins. She picked up her phone, started searching for flights. No flights, Jack said. We drive. Tonight, now, we do not leave digital trails. Ava looked at him, smiled. A hard smile, a warrior's smile. You have been planning this for 11 years. They left within the hour. Jack grabbed a duffel bag from a corner of the storage unit, already packed. Go bag. The habit of a man who has lived his life ready to deploy at a moment's notice. Clothes, gishu, fake IDs, weapons, not military issue. Civilian firearms purchased through channels that do not require paperwork. A Glock 19 for him, a Sig Sauer P365 for Ava, and something heavier. A Remington 870 shotgun, pistol grip, extended magazine. The kind of weapon you bring when you expect serious trouble. Ava raised an eyebrow when she saw the arsenal. Expecting a war, expecting to finish one. They drove north through the night, up Interstate 5, that endless ribbon of asphalt connecting San Diego to the rest of the continent. Jack kept the truck at exactly the speed limit. No reason to attract attention. No reason to get pulled over by highway patrol and have to explain the weapons in the back, the fake eyes in the glove box, the obsessive investigation that would look, to any outside observer, like the ravings of a paranoid old man. Ava read Cole's journal by the glow of her phone, working through the cipher slowly, decoding sentences, writing translations in a notebook. Sometimes she would read a passage aloud, her voice quiet in the darkness of the cab. October 2010. Observed Stone meeting with unknown individual, civilian clothes, UAE passport, Dubai airport, money exchanged. Approximate value 200,000 USD. Stone does not have financial clearance for this level of transaction. Jack gripped the steering wheel tighter. Dubai, money laundering capital of the Middle East, where fortunes move through shell companies and offshore accounts, where you could buy anything if you knew the right people, where weapons dealers and terrorists and intelligence operatives all drank at the same bars and pretended not to recognize each other. Another entry, March 2011. Garrison approved requisition for 12 crates of small arms, listed as destroyed in firebase fire. But I saw those crates loaded onto a destination unknown, serial numbers filed off. The picture was emerging, piece by piece, transaction by transaction, an operation that had been running for decades, that had evolved from stealing souvenirs to moving serious material. And at the center of it, 5 men, brothers, warriors, traitors. They reached Portland at dawn, the city waking beneath gray skies and the smell of rain. The VA hospital was on the east side, a sprawling complex of buildings that housed the broken men America had used and then tried to forget. Men missing limbs, missing sanity, missing hope. Warriors who had given everything and received a bureaucracy in return. Master Chief Thaddeus Kane lived in the long-term care ward, room 347. Jack had called ahead, posing as family, confirming Kane was still alive, still capable of conversation. The nurse had said yes, but warned that Kane did not receive many visitors, said he preferred to be alone, said he had become bitter in his old age, angry at a world that had taken his legs and his career and left him with nothing but pain and memories. Jack and Ava took the elevator to the 3rd floor, walked down hallways that smelled of disinfectant and old food and the particular sadness of places where people go to wait for death. They found room 347. Jack knocked. No answer. He knocked again, louder. A voice from inside, harsh, tired. Go away. Jack opened the door anyway. The room was small, a single bed, a wheelchair, a window overlooking a parking lot. Thaddeus Kane sat in the wheelchair, his back to the door, staring out at nothing. He was 66 years old but looked older. White hair cropped short, shoulders that had once been powerful now thin, wasted by years of immobility. He wore a flannel shirt and sweatpants, the unofficial uniform of men who no longer have anywhere to go. I said, go away, Kane repeated without turning. Jack stepped inside, closed the door behind Ava. Hello, Thaddeus. Kane's shoulders tensed. He spun the wheelchair around with surprising speed, and Jack saw his face for the first time in 10 years. It was a face carved by pain. Deep lines bracketed his mouth. His eyes, once sharp and commanding, were dull with medication and resignation. But when Kane saw who stood in his doorway, those eyes came alive, widened, and then narrowed with something like fear. Jack Mercer, Kane whispered. His voice was rough, as if he had not used it much lately. What the hell are you doing here? Jack nodded toward Ava. She wanted to meet you. Master Chief Thaddeus Kane, this is Sergeant Ava Hartwell, Cole's daughter. Kane's gaze shifted to Ava. His expression collapsed. For a moment, he looked like he might cry. Then he mastered himself, that old training reasserting itself. You look like him. Same eyes, same stubborn jawline. Ava said nothing, just pulled out Cole's journal, held it up. Kane stared at the journal. All color drained from his face. Where did you get that? My mother. She died 3 weeks ago. She had been holding it for 11 years, waiting until I was ready. Kane closed his eyes, took a shuddering breath. When he opened them again, he looked at Jack. You should not have come here. It is not safe. Jack crossed the room, knelt beside the wheelchair so they were eye to eye. Tell me what happened in April 2012. Tell me who did this to you. Kane's hands clenched into fists on the armrests. I fell. You did not fall. You were pushed by 2 men working for Garrison. Kane said nothing. Cole knew he was going to die, Jack continued. He told me 2 days before. He gave you evidence. A USB drive. Where is it? Still nothing. Ava stepped forward. Her voice was cold. My father trusted you. He called you TK. He said if anything happened to him, you would know what to do. So what did you do? Did you go to JAG? Did you expose them? Or did you hide? Kane flinched like she had struck him. You do not understand. You cannot understand. These men, they are not just SEALs. They have connections, power. They have files on everyone, dirt, blackmail. They can destroy careers, destroy families. When they came for me, they did not just threaten me. They showed me photos of my daughter, my grandchildren, told me what would happen if I talked. Jack's jaw tightened. So you stayed silent. I stayed alive. Kane's voice broke. And I have lived with that choice every single day for 11 years. I wake up in this chair in this room and I think about Cole, about how he came to me, showed me what he found, asked me to stand with him. And I said yes. I said I would back him up. He paused. When his voice returned, it was a whisper. But when they killed him, when they came for me, I broke. I let fear win. I let my brother die for nothing. Not for nothing, Ava said. She held up the journal. He left evidence. He left a trail, and we are going to follow it. Kane looked at her, then at Jack. You have no idea what you are walking into. Then tell us, Jack said. Give us the USB drive. Help us finish what Cole started. Kane was quiet for a long time. Outside, rain began to fall, pattering against the window, washing over the parking lot below. Finally, he wheeled himself to a small closet, opened it, reached behind a stack of old uniforms, pulled out a shoebox. Inside the box, wrapped in plastic, was a USB drive. He handed it to Jack. Everything Cole found, financial records going back to 1991, communication logs, photos, video, enough to put all of them in Leavenworth for life. Jack held the drive. Such a small thing, no bigger than his thumb, but it contained the truth, the proof, the justice Cole had died trying to deliver. Why now, Jack asked. Why give this to us now? Kane looked at Ava. Because she is right. I have been a coward long enough. I am 66 years old. I am dying. Emphysema. Maybe 2 years left. What are they going to do? Kill me? Good. At least I will die having done one decent thing. He paused. But Jack, you need to understand, this is not just about Cole. This operation has been running for 30 years. They have moved weapons, explosives, technology, and worse. What worse? Kane's voice dropped. Radiological material. Plutonium from dismantled Soviet warheads. They have been selling it to the highest bidder. If that gets into the wrong hands, if terrorists build a dirty bomb, if American cities start glowing in the dark, that blood is on them. On us. On everyone who knew and stayed silent. The room was very quiet now. Only the sound of rain, of breathing, of 3 warriors standing at the edge of a precipice knowing that what came next would either redeem them or destroy them. Jack pocketed the USB drive. We need to move fast. If Garrison knows we have this, he already knows, Kane interrupted. He called me yesterday, asked if I had received any unusual visitors, asked if Cole's family had contacted me. He knows you are investigating. He is watching. Jack's phone buzzed. He pulled it out. Block number. He answered. Master Chief Mercer, a voice said. Smooth, cultured, the voice of command. This is Admiral Frank Garrison. I know what you are doing. I know you have Cole's journal. Meet me tomorrow morning, Euro 800, my office at Nav Spec War. Come alone. Or Ava Hartwell has an accident during her next training exercise. The line went dead. Jack looked at Ava, then at Kane. His hand moved to the Glock on his hip, the weight of it suddenly reassuring, suddenly necessary. We are not going to his office, Jack said. His voice was steady now. Decided. We are going on the offensive. No more playing defense. No more waiting for them to move against us. Ava smiled. That hard smile again. What is the plan? Jack looked at the USB drive in his hand. At the evidence that could bring down 5 traitors and expose a conspiracy that had been running since the Cold War ended. At the truth his brother had died to protect. First, he said, we copy this drive. Multiple backups. We send copies to journalists, to politicians, to every NCIS office in the country. We make sure that even if they kill us, the truth survives. And then, Jack's smile matched Ava's, hard and cold and ready. Then we go to war. The USB drive felt heavier than it should. Jack held it in his palm, this small rectangle of plastic and circuitry that contained 30 years of treason, 30 years of blood money, 30 years of lies told by men who swore oaths to defend their country. The weight was not physical, it was the weight of evidence, the weight of proof, the weight of justice that had been delayed for more than a decade but could no longer be denied. They sat in Kane's room at the VA hospital, the 3 of them forming a triangle of conspiracy in that small space that smelled of antiseptic and old regret. Rain continued to fall outside, Portland gray and endless, washing over parking lots and streets in the city below. Jack had plugged the USB drive into one of his laptops, the screen glowing pale blue in the dimness, casting shadows across their faces. The first file that opened was a spreadsheet, rows and columns of numbers stretching back to 91. Dates, amounts, account numbers, transaction codes, the language of money moving through shadows. Jack scrolled through it, his eyes scanning the data with the methodical patience of someone who had spent 11 years learning to read between lines, to see patterns in chaos. Ava leaned over his shoulder. "What are we looking at?" "Financial records," Jack said. "Wire transfers. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Dubai. Small amounts at first, 10,000 here, 20 there. But watch what happens after 2001. He scrolled faster. The numbers grew. 50,000, 100. By 2005, individual transactions were moving $500,000. By 2010, single transfers exceeded 2 million. Kane's voice came from behind them, rough with memory. September 11th changed everything. Before that, they were careful, small scale, moving captured weapons to friendly forces, funding black ops that Congress would not approve. They could almost justify it, almost convince themselves they were patriots. "And after?" Ava asked. "After, the justification stopped mattering. The war on terror created chaos. Trillions of dollars flowing into Iraq and Afghanistan. Equipment disappearing. Entire shipping containers going missing. No one tracking it. No one caring. As long as the war machine kept running, as long as contractors got paid, as long as generals got their stars, nobody asked hard questions." Jack opened another file. This one was text. An email chain, subject line redacted but the content clear enough. Dates from 2008. 3 participants, identified only by code names. Sentinel, Viper, Ghost. Sentinel, Garrison. Viper, Marcus Kane. Ghost, Derek Stone. The emails discussed a shipment, 20 crates of equipment listed as destroyed in a mortar attack on forward operating base Salerno. But the emails told a different story. The crates were intact, loaded onto a civilian cargo plane, flown to Dubai, sold to a broker who asked no questions and paid in cash transferred to accounts in the Cayman Islands. $2.4 million, split 5 ways. Jack's jaw tightened. This is not just weapons. This is sophisticated material, night vision, communications gear, maybe more. He clicked to the next email, this one from Ghost to Sentinel. Buyer requesting upgrade. Wants access to demolitions. Specifically interested in C4, Semtex, Det Cord, can acquire, need approval to move. The response from Sentinel came 3 hours later. One word. Approved. Ava's voice was cold. They were selling explosives to terrorists. Not directly, Kane said. They were selling to brokers, middlemen, contractors who worked gray markets. Those brokers sold to anyone. Warlords, militias, criminal syndicates, and yes, eventually terrorists. The people who blew up embassies and hotels and marketplaces. The people who built IEDs that killed American soldiers. Jack looked at Kane. "Cole found this?" Kane nodded. He started noticing things in 2010. Shipments that did not match manifests. Equipment requisitioned but never arriving. He began documenting, photographing, recording conversations. He was methodical, patient. He knew if he moved too fast, they would bury him. What changed? Why did he go to you when he did? Kane wheeled himself closer to the laptop, clicked to another file. This one was video, helmet camera footage. The timestamp read October 8th, 2011, 1 week before Cole died. The video showed a nighttime operation, green-tinted night vision turning the world into shades of gray and black. A squad of SEALs moving through a compound in Afghanistan. Voices over comms, clipped and professional. Shots fired, a firefight lasting maybe 90 seconds. Then silence. Bodies on the ground. The team clearing rooms. And then, in one of the back rooms, they found it. Crates, military issue, stenciled with radiation warning symbols. The triangular trefoil that meant danger, contamination, death measured in rems and row engines. The camera moved closer. A hand reached out, pried open one of the crates. Inside, secured in foam padding, were metal cylinders, each one marked with Cyrillic lettering, Russian, Soviet era. Jack's breath caught. That is weapons-grade plutonium. 10 kilograms, Kane said quietly. enough to build a dirty bomb that could make an entire city uninhabitable for decades. Cole was on that raid. He saw what was in those crates. And 3 days later, when he checked the after-action report, those crates were not mentioned. They had been erased from the official record. Because someone took them, Ava said. Because Garrison's operation had evolved. They were not just moving conventional weapons anymore. They were moving the kind of material that could reshape the world. Nuclear material in the hands of terrorists. A dirty bomb detonated in New York or Los Angeles or Washington, D.C. Millions dead. Entire cities poisoned. And 5 American warriors would be responsible. Jack closed the laptop. His hands were shaking. Not from fear, from rage. From the knowledge that the men who had done this were still free, still wearing uniforms, still saluting flags and talking about honor and sacrifice while they grew rich on the currency of potential apocalypse. We need to make copies, Jack said. Multiple backups. We distribute this to every news outlet, every congressional office, every inspector general in the Department of Defense. We make it impossible to bury. Kane opened a drawer in his bedside table, pulled out a small plastic bag containing 5 USB drives. Already done. I made copies years ago. I was just too much of a coward to use them. But now you can. Jack took the drives, looked at Kane, saw the old man's eyes wet with tears he refused to shed, saw the weight of 11 years of guilt, of knowing he could have stopped this and did not, of watching the news and wondering if some attack, some atrocity, could have been prevented if he had been braver. You are not a coward, Jack said. You survived. That took courage too. Kane shook his head. Survival is not courage. It is just fear with a longer timeline. But maybe this makes up for some of it. Ava placed her hand on Kane's shoulder. My father trusted you. That means something. The old man nodded, could not speak, just sat there in his wheelchair, rain falling outside, and let himself finally feel the grief he had been holding back for more than a decade. They left Portland at noon, driving south through rain that turned to mist, and then to California sunshine as they crossed back into their home state. Jack drove. Ava worked on her laptop in the passenger seat, uploading files to secure servers, encrypted email accounts, digital dead drops that would ensure the evidence survived even if they did not. She had contacts, journalists who had covered military scandals, congressional staffers who worked for senators on armed services committees, NCIS agents who were not part of Garrison's network. By the time they reached the Oregon-California border, copies of Cole's evidence were spreading through secure channels, time bombs waiting to detonate. But Jack knew it was not enough. Evidence could be challenged. Lawyers could argue chain of custody, question authenticity, bury it in classified hearings where truth went to die. They needed something more, something immediate, something that could not be denied or delayed or drowned in bureaucracy. They needed a confession, on camera, undeniable. Tell me about Grenada, Ava said suddenly. She had closed her laptop, was looking at Jack with those gray eyes that saw too much. You and Garrison, you and my father, you were all there together. What happened? Jack was quiet for a long time. The highway stretched ahead, Interstate 5 cutting through farmland and truck stops in small towns, where America still looked like the country they had fought to defend. Finally, he spoke. October 1983, Operation Urgent Fury. The Reagan administration decided to invade Grenada, small Caribbean island, communist government, Cuban military advisors building an airstrip. The official story was we were rescuing American medical students. The real story was Cold War politics. We could not let another Cuba happen. He paused, checking mirrors, old habits, always watching for tails, for surveillance, for the moment when hunters become hunted. I was 23 years old. Fresh out of Bud/S. Cole was the same age. We were assigned to SEAL Team 4. Garrison was our squad leader. Kane was platoon sergeant. We were kids, thought we were invincible, thought we were going to save the world. What was the mission? Secure Point Saline's airport, clear it of Cuban forces, hold it for Marine landing. Standard assault, fast and hard. We went in at night, parachute drop, low altitude. I remember the wind, the sound of the C-130 engines, the moment when you step out into nothing and trust that the chute will open. Did it go wrong? Everything goes wrong in combat. The intelligence was bad. Cuban forces were stronger than expected, better armed, better trained. We hit the ground and immediately took fire. Lost 2 men in the first 5 minutes, but we adapted, pushed forward, cleared the airport by dawn. And then, Jack's hands tightened on the steering wheel. And then we found the arms cache, building at the south end of the runway. Cuban garrison had been using it for storage. We breached it expecting ammunition, small arms. What we found was enough weapons to supply an insurgency, Soviet-made, AK-47s, RPGs, crates of grenades, enough to arm a small army. Ava was watching him closely. What did Garrison do? At first he did what he was supposed to, called it in, requested EOD to secure the cache. We were standing guard, waiting for the bomb squad to arrive. And I saw him do it, saw him pocket a pistol, Soviet Makarov, 9mm, just slipped it into his vest. Casual, like it meant nothing. You said something? No, Jack's voice was bitter. I said nothing. Cole said nothing. It was just a pistol, a souvenir. Every soldier takes souvenirs. Dog tags, flags, spent brass. It seemed harmless. But that was the moment. That was when it started. When Garrison learned he could take things and no one would stop him. The highway blurred ahead. Jack was not seeing California anymore. He was seeing Grenada, 23 years old, blood on his hands, brothers dying around him, and one man learning that rules were flexible, that honor was negotiable, that the line between warrior and thief was thinner than anyone wanted to admit. Panama was worse, Jack continued. In 1989, Operation Just Cause. Noriega had turned from CIA asset to liability. We went in to remove him, clean regime change. But the thing about regime change is it creates chaos. Banks get looted, government buildings burned, evidence destroyed, and in that chaos, things disappear. What things? Money. Lots of it. Noriega's cartel money, millions in cash stacked in warehouses. Officially, it was all confiscated, sent back to the United States. Evidence in drug trafficking cases. But some of it never made it onto the manifests. Some of it walked away in duffel bags carried by men who knew how to move through chaos without leaving traces. Garrison? Jack nodded. By then he was a lieutenant commander. Had authority, had access. He approached us one night, me, Opinoan, told us about an opportunity, said there was money sitting in a warehouse that was about to burn anyway. Why let it burn? Why not take some? Fund operations the politicians were too scared to approve. Black ops that saved American lives. What did you say? I said no. Cole said no. We were still believers then. Still thought the rules mattered. But Garrison was not asking anymore. He was telling us he was doing it, with us or without us. And Kane? Kane was older, pragmatic. He said sometimes you have to get your hands dirty to keep the larger mission clean. I think he took some of Garrison's money. I think he justified it as operational funding. And maybe it started that way. Maybe in Panama it really was about funding black ops. But by the Gulf War, it was not about patriotism anymore. It was about profit. The Gulf War, Ava said, that is when it became an operation. Jack exited the highway. They were approaching Sacramento now, halfway home. He pulled into a truck stop, parked away from other vehicles. They needed to talk without the distraction of driving. Needed to plan what came next. They sat in the truck, engine off, windows cracked to let in the smell of diesel and fried food in America at work. Jack pulled out his phone, opened a document he had been building for years. A timeline. Names and dates and events that, when laid end to end, told the story of how 5 warriors became criminals. 991, Desert Storm. Garrison is now a full commander. He has access to logistics, to supply chains, to the vast flow of material moving through Kuwait and Saudi Arabia and Iraq. And Saddam Hussein's military is collapsing. Entire depots full of Soviet weapons, equipment, vehicles, all of it captured, most of it destroyed, but some of it, enough of it, diverted. Ava leaned in, reading over his shoulder. Who else was involved by then? Marcus Kane joined in the Gulf War. He was a senior chief, smart, ruthless, good at making problems disappear. Cole always said Kane had dead eyes, like something human had been burned out of him. And Stone? Derek Stone came later, Iraq, 2003. He was the logistics specialist, the man who could make shipping manifests say whatever he needed them to say. The man who could move a container full of weapons out of Basra and have it show up in Dubai with paperwork clean enough to pass any inspection. What about the other 2, Reaper and Shepard? Jack shook his head. Cole never identified them, But based on his notes, Reaper is probably someone with demolitions expertise, someone who can handle sensitive material, explosives, chemical, radiological, and Shepard, Cole thought Shepard might be CIA. Someone inside the intelligence community who can provide cover, make investigations disappear. They sat in silence for a moment, both of them processing the scale of what they were facing. Not just corrupt SEALs, an entire network, military, intelligence, contractors, all of them feeding at the same trough, all of them with motivation to keep the operation running, to keep the money flowing, to keep the truth buried. Ava's phone buzzed. She looked at it, frowned. Text from an unknown number. She showed Jack the screen. 3 words. Stop now, final warning. Jack's hand moved to his Glock. He scanned the parking lot. Trucks, cars, a few travelers moving between the convenience store and the restrooms. Nothing obviously threatening, but that meant nothing. Professional surveillance is invisible until it wants to be seen. They know we have the files, Ava said. Of course they know. We just uploaded them to a dozen different servers. Garrison has been running this operation for 30 years. He has people everywhere. IT specialists who monitor networks. Hackers who can trace encrypted communications. We were never going to stay invisible. So what do? We accelerate. We do not give them time to get ahead of us. We release everything. Tonight. To every news outlet simultaneously. Make it public before they can stop us. Jack started the truck. They pulled back onto the highway, heading south toward San Diego, toward home, toward the final confrontation that had been building for 11 years. But as they drove, Jack's mind was not on the road ahead. It was on a conversation from long ago, a night in Kandahar, 3 days before Cole died. They had been sitting in a fob, drinking bad coffee, watching the sun set over mountains that had killed empires. Cole had looked at him, that serious expression he got when he was working through something difficult. If something happens to me, Cole had said, if I do not make it back, you need to promise me something. Nothing is going to happen, Jack had replied. Standard patrol, we have done 100 of them. But Cole had not let it go. Promise me, Jack. Promise me you will look after Ava. Make sure she knows I loved her. Make sure she understands why I had to do this. And Jack, tired and worried and not wanting to think about mortality, had made the promise. Sure, brother, but you are going to be fine. You are always fine. Except Cole had not been fine. Cole had been right. Had known his brothers were planning to kill him. Had walked into that patrol with his eyes open, knowing it might be his last mission. And done it anyway because that is what warriors do when they see wrong and refuse to stay silent. Jack had failed that promise. Failed to protect Cole. Failed to expose his murderers. Failed to give Ava the answer she deserved. But he was not going to fail anymore. Whatever came next, whatever the case that he was going to finish this. They reached in San Diego after dark. Jack drove straight to his storage unit, pulled inside, rolled down the door behind them. The space was exactly as they had left it. Maps on the walls, laptops running. The shrine to obsession that had consumed 11 years of his life. Ava immediately went to work. She connected her laptop to Jack's network, began the process of uploading Cole's files to the last set of secure servers. Cloud storage, distributed systems that would replicate the data across multiple locations. Even if Garrison's people found one server, shut it down, the others would keep functioning. Jack made calls. He had contacts too. Not many. 11 years of being seen as obsessed and paranoid had cost him friendships, burned bridges. But there were still a few who would listen. A journalist at the Washington Post who had covered military corruption. An NCIS agent named Rebecca Cross who had a reputation for not backing down from powerful men. A congressional staffer who worked for a senator on the Armed Services Committee. To each of them, Jack said the same thing. Check your email in 1 hour. I am sending you evidence of a 30-year conspiracy. High-ranking military officers selling weapons and nuclear material to terrorists. Names, dates, financial records, video proof. This is the biggest scandal since Abu Ghraib. Maybe bigger. And if you do not act fast, it will be buried. Some of them hung up, thought he was crazy, but others listened, heard the certainty in his voice, the clarity of someone who has spent years building a case and finally has the proof he needs. By midnight, the uploads were complete. The files were distributed across the internet, copies sitting in inboxes and secure servers and cloud storage, time bombs waiting to detonate at dawn. Ava closed her laptop, looked at Jack. It is done. By morning, everyone will know. Garrison, Kane, Stone, all of them. They will be finished. Jack wanted to believe her, wanted to think that truth was enough, that evidence would bring justice, that the system worked if you just gave it the right information. But he had lived too long, seen too much, knew that powerful men did not fall easily. They had lawyers and connections and classified compartments where evidence went to die. They had senators who owed them favors and generals who protected their own. Evidence was necessary, but it was not sufficient. They needed something else, something that could not be classified or sealed or buried in legal proceedings. They needed the world to see these men confess, live, undeniable. We need to draw them out, Jack said. Make them come to us, on our terms. How? Jack pulled out his phone, dialed the number that had called him in Portland, the blocked number that belonged to Admiral Frank Garrison. The phone rang 3 times, then Garrison answered. Jack, his voice was calm, almost friendly. I was expecting your call. You threatened Ava. I made a promise. There is a difference. But it seems you did not take my advice. I am looking at network activity right now. Multiple uploads, encrypted files moving to servers all over the country. You have been busy. Jack said nothing. Let Garrison talk. Let him reveal how much he knew. It will not matter, Garrison continued. Those files will be challenged, declared classified, sealed by judges who understand national security. You think you are exposing us, but all you are doing is painting targets on yourself and everyone you love. Then let us talk, face to face, you and me, tomorrow night, anywhere you choose. Garrison laughed. So you can record me? Get a confession? Jack, I have been doing this for 30 years. I am not that stupid. Then I will keep digging, keep uploading, keep making noise until someone listens. A pause, then Garrison's voice, harder now. You want to meet? Fine. Building 47, Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. Tomorrow night, 2200 hours. Come alone. Bring Cole's files, all of them. And we will end this, one way or another. The line went dead. Ava was staring at Jack. You are not actually going there? Yes, it is a trap. He will kill you. Probably. But he will also talk. Men like Garrison, they cannot help themselves. They need to explain, to justify, to make you understand how smart they are, how necessary their crimes were. And when he talks, I will be recording. Ava shook her head. You cannot do this alone. Jack looked at her. At this young woman who looked so much like her father, who had inherited Cole's courage, his stubbornness, his refusal to accept injustice. He had promised Cole he would protect her. But maybe protection was not about keeping her safe. Maybe it was about giving her the tools to fight her own battles. I am not going alone, Jack said. I am going wired. Camera, audio, broadcast live to every news outlet we just contacted. Garrison does not know it, but when he confesses, the whole world will be watching. And if he kills you before you get the confession, then you finish it. You take everything we have built, everything your father died to expose, and you burn them down. No mercy, no hesitation. You make sure the last thing they see before they die in prison is your father's face. Ava held his gaze, nodded once, sharp and certain. They spent the rest of the night preparing. Jack tested the camera equipment, a button camera hidden in his jacket, a throat microphone that would pick up every word, transmitters that would broadcast to Ava's laptop, which would relay the signal to a dozen live streams simultaneously. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, every platform that could carry video. By the time Garrison realized what was happening, millions of people would be watching. Ava prepared the tactical side. She contacted NCIS agent Rebecca Cross, the one person Jack trusted in federal law enforcement, briefed her on the plan. Cross was skeptical, angry that they had not come to her sooner, but when she saw the evidence, when she understood the scope of the conspiracy, she agreed to position a tactical team nearby. Not close enough to scare Garrison off, but close enough to intervene if Jack's signal went dead. As dawn broke over San Diego, they reviewed the plan one final time. Jack would go to Building 47 at 2200 hours, would meet Garrison, would get him talking, and when Garrison confessed, when he revealed the full scope of his crimes on camera, Cross's team would move in, arrest him, arrest anyone with him, end the conspiracy in a single coordinated strike. It was a good plan, solid, built on years of experience and careful preparation. It was also going to get Jack killed. He knew this, could feel it in his bones. The same intuition that had kept him alive through 4 decades of combat, that had whispered warnings in firefights and ambushes, and moments when death came close enough to smell. Garrison would not come alone, would not let Jack walk away. This meeting was not about negotiation. It was about eliminating the last threat to an operation that had made them all rich and powerful. But knowing you are walking into a trap and choosing to do it anyway, that is what separates warriors from survivors. Survivors run. Warriors walk toward the danger because someone has to. Because if they do not, evil wins by default. The day passed slowly. Jack tried to rest but could not. Kept seeing Cole's face. Kept hearing his voice from that last conversation in Kandahar. Promise me, Jack. Promise me you will finish this. At 2,000 hours, Jack put on the wire. Ava checked the equipment, made sure the video feed was clear, the audio crisp. They did a test broadcast. Everything worked. The technology that would have seemed like science fiction when Jack first became a SEAL was now available to anyone with a laptop and internet connection. The democratization of surveillance. It cut both ways. At 2,100 hours, Jack loaded his Glock, checked the magazine, chambered around, slipped the weapon into the holster on his hip. He did not expect to use it. Garrison would have overwhelming force, but it was comforting anyway. The weight of options. The knowledge that if everything went wrong, he could at least take some of them with him. At 2,130 hours, Ava grabbed his arm. Uncle Jack, her voice was tight. If this goes bad, if you do not make it out, I want you to know my father was right to trust you. You kept fighting when everyone else gave up. That matters. Jack pulled her into a hug, held her for a moment. This girl who was not his daughter but felt like it anyway. This warrior who was about to watch him walk toward death because that is what duty required. Take care of Ghost, he said. The Belgian Malinois was sleeping in the corner, old and gray but still loyal, still ready to fight if his pack needed him. Ava nodded, could not speak. At 2,145 hours, Jack walked out of the storage unit, got into his truck, drove through San Diego toward the Naval Amphibious Base, toward Building 47, toward the confrontation that had been building since October 2011, when 5 men decided that Cole Hartwell knew too much and had to die. The base was quiet at night. Most personnel were off duty. The gate guard checked Jack's retired military ID, waved him through without questions. Old habits, old courtesies, the assumption that a Master Chief, even retired, belonged here. Building 47 sat at the edge of the base, an old warehouse that dated back to World War II. It had been used for storage, for training, for a dozen different purposes over the decades. Now it stood dark and empty, windows broken, weeds growing through cracks in the parking lot. The kind of place where bad things could happen and no one would hear the screams. Jack parked 50 yards away, checked his equipment one final time. The camera was running, the microphone active. Ava was receiving the feed, watching from the storage unit, ready to alert Cross's tactical team if needed. He looked at himself in the rearview mirror, 62 years old, gray beard, lines carved deep by sun and stress and sorrow. He looked like what he was, an old warrior on his last mission, but his eyes were clear, his hands steady. He got out of the truck, walked toward Building 47, each step measured, each breath controlled. Warrior walking, the gait of someone who has faced death so many times that fear becomes background noise, manageable, contained. The warehouse door was open. Yellow light spilled out, cutting through the darkness. Jack stepped inside and saw that he was not walking into a meeting. He was walking into an execution. Admiral Frank Garrison stood in the center of the warehouse, dress uniform crisp despite the late hour, chest glittering with ribbons. Beside him, Command Master Chief Marcus Kane, the man who had been on Cole's final patrol, who had likely pulled the trigger on the IED, who had maybe finished Cole with a knife when the explosion failed to kill him. And Senior Chief Derek Stone, the logistics specialist, the man who made things disappear. All 3 of them armed, all 3 of them looking at Jack with expressions that ranged from regret to cold calculation to something like satisfaction. But it was what Jack saw behind them that made his blood freeze. Ava, tied to a chair, tape over her mouth, Ghost in a cage beside her, the dog snarling and throwing himself against the bars, desperate to protect his handler. Garrison smiled. Hello, Jack. I hope you do not mind, But I invited one more guest to our little reunion. Your niece was kind enough to join us, although I must say her arrival was less than voluntary. Jack's hand moved towards his Glock, but Kane was faster. Had his rifle up and aimed before Jack's fingers touched leather. I would not, Kane said. His voice was flat, empty. The voice of someone who had killed before and would do it again without hesitation. Jack froze. Calculated angles, distances, possibilities. 3 armed men, Ava hostage, ghost caged, no good options, no clean exits. He raised his hands slowly, palms out, the universal gesture of surrender. Garrison walked closer, his smile widened. Did you really think we would not find her? Did you really think your encryption was good enough to hide from us? Jack, we have been running this operation for 30 years. We have people everywhere. NSA, CIA, defense contractors. We knew the moment you left Portland. We knew the moment you uploaded those files. And we knew you would come here tonight because men like you cannot help yourselves. You have to be heroes, even when it gets you killed. Jack said nothing, just stood there, watching, waiting. The button camera on his jacket was still recording, still broadcasting. Every word Garrison said was going out live to the world. Every confession, every threat, all of it captured in digital clarity that could not be denied or classified or buried. He just needed to keep Garrison talking. Where are the files? Garrison asked. All of them, every copy. Uploaded, distributed, out of reach. Garrison's smile faded. That is unfortunate, because now I have no reason to keep either of you alive. He nodded to Kane. The big man walked toward Ava, pulled a knife from his belt, the same style K-bar that SEALs had carried for generations. The same knife he had likely used on Cole. Stop, Jack said. His voice was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that comes before violence. You want to kill someone? Kill me. She has nothing to do with this. She has everything to do with this. Garrison walked to stand beside Ava's chair, looked down at her with something like pity. Her father should have stayed quiet, should have accepted that some things are bigger than individual conscience. But he did not. And now his daughter is about to learn the same lesson. Silence is survival. Principle is death. He paused, but before we end this, I want you to understand something, Jack. I want you to know why. Because you deserve that much. You were my brother once. Jack kept his hands raised, kept his eyes on Garrison, kept the camera pointed at the Admiral's face. Tell me, Jack said. Make me understand how you went from warrior to traitor. And Garrison, with the narcissism of powerful men who believe their own mythology, began to explain. Admiral Frank Garrison stood in the yellow light of Building 47, his dress uniform immaculate despite the late hour, despite the violence about to unfold. Behind him, the shadows stretched long and deep, swallowing the far corners of the warehouse, where old equipment rusted and pigeons nested in the rafters. The air smelled of oil and dust and the particular emptiness of places where men once worked, but now only ghosts remained. Jack kept his hands raised, kept his breathing steady, kept his eyes on Garrison's face while his peripheral vision tracked Kane and Stone, tracked their positions, their weapons, their body language that told him everything about their intentions. Kane stood to the right, rifle aimed at Jack's center mass, finger outside the trigger guard, but ready. Professional, patient, the kind of shooter who had killed before and would not hesitate now. Stone was behind Ava, one hand resting on her shoulder in a gesture that might have looked protective if not for the pistol in his other hand. Ghost continued to throw himself against the cage bars, the Belgian Malinois understanding what his training had taught him, that his handler was in danger, that threats surrounded them, that he needed to break free and protect his pack. The dog's snarls echoed through the warehouse, primal and desperate. Garrison walked slowly toward Jack, his polished shoes clicking on concrete, each step measured, each movement calculated. The walk of a man who had spent 42 years in uniform, who had learned that authority is as much about presence as rank, about how you carry yourself when others are watching. You want to understand, Garrison said. His voice was calm, almost gentle, the tone of a teacher explaining difficult concepts to a student who had not yet grasped the lesson. Very well, I will tell you exactly how we got here, how 5 warriors became what you call traitors. He paused, let the silence stretch. Jack knew this technique, had used it himself in interrogations. The pause that makes the subject lean forward, that creates anticipation, that puts the interrogator in control of the rhythm and flow of conversation. But Jack also knew something Garrison did not. The button camera on his jacket was broadcasting everything. Every word, every gesture, every confession about to spill from a narcissist who believed he was too powerful to face consequences. Somewhere out there, NCIS agent Rebecca Cross was watching. News producers were recording. Millions of people were starting to tune in to live streams titled things like Navy SEAL Conspiracy Exposed and Breaking. Military corruption caught live. The trap Garrison had set for Jack was also the trap Jack had set for Garrison. They just did not know it yet. "Tell me," Jack said. "Make me understand how you justified it." Garrison smiled, started from the beginning. From a night in October 1983 when they were all young and stupid and thought they were going to save the world. Grenada, you remember? We dropped onto Point Salines Airport, took fire, lost Miller and Jackson in the first wave. But we pushed through, secured the objective, and then we found the arms cache. Jack remembered. Could still see it. The building at the south end of the runway, Cuban garrison storage, crates stacked floor to ceiling, enough weapons to supply an insurgency. "I took a pistol," Garrison continued. "Soviet Makarov. You saw me do it. Cole saw me. Neither of you said anything. And in that moment, I learned something important. The rules we were taught, all that honor and integrity bullshit they drill into you at Annapolis, at Bud/S, it is just window dressing. What matters is what you can get away with. What matters is power." He began to pace, warming to his subject. The professor now, delivering a lecture he had been preparing for 30 years. Panama came next, 1989. We went in to remove Noriega, clean regime change. But regime change is never clean. It is case. Banks burning, government buildings looted, and in that chaos, there was money. Cartel money. Noriega's fortune. Officially, it all got confiscated, sent back to the States. But who was counting? Who could track every dollar in every warehouse when half the city was on fire? I took $2 million that night, loaded it into duffel bags, drove it to a safe house, paid off some Panamanian officials to look the other way. By the time anyone noticed it was missing, the paperwork said it had burned in a fire. Tragic loss of evidence. Garrison stopped pacing, looked directly at Jack. And you know what? Nobody cared. Nobody investigated. The mission was successful. Noriega was captured. That was all that mattered. The money was just a footnote, a rounding error in the chaos of war. Jack's jaw tightened. "So you learned you could steal and get away with it." "I learned that the system does not care about rules. It cares about results. Give them a victory and they will overlook how you achieved it. That is the real lesson they should teach at the academies. Morality is for people who cannot afford pragmatism." "The Gulf War," Jack said. "That is when you started the operation." Garrison nodded. 1991, Desert Storm. Saddam's military collapsed faster than anyone expected. We rolled into Kuwait, pushed into Iraq, captured depot after depot full of Soviet equipment. Tanks, artillery, small arms, chemical weapons. The official procedure was to catalog it all, destroy most of it, ship some back for analysis. But there was so much. Thousands of tons of material. And the tracking systems were primitive. Paper manifests, manual counts, easy to make things disappear if you knew what you were doing. And you knew what you were doing. I had the rank by then. Commander, access to logistics. I could sign off on destruction orders, could authorize shipments, could make a container full of AK-47s vanish from a manifest and reappear 3 weeks later in a warehouse in Dubai with paperwork so clean it would pass any customs inspection. He smiled. That is when I brought in Marcus. He was a senior chief then, smart, ruthless, good at solving problems. I told him what I was doing, offered him a cut. He did not even hesitate, just asked how much and when do we start. Kane's expression did not change, just stood there holding the rifle, listening to his own story being told like he was hearing about someone else's life. Stone came later, Garrison continued. Iraq, 2003, the second war. By then we needed someone who really understood logistics, modern tracking systems, digital manifests, someone who could hack databases, alter shipping routes, create phantom companies to receive cargo. Derek was perfect. Former intelligence, understood networks, knew how to hide in plain sight. What about the others? Jack asked. Reaper, Shepard. Garrison's smile widened. Ah, the mystery men. Cole never figured those out, did he? He got close, but not close enough. Who are they? Garrison walked to the side of the warehouse where a figure emerged from the shadows. A man in his late 40s, compact and wiry, with the careful movements of someone trained in handling things that explode. He wore civilian clothes but carried himself with military precision. Meet Reaper, Garrison said. Chief Warrant Officer Michael Vega, explosives specialist, chemical weapons expert, and most importantly, the man who can handle radiological material without killing himself. Vega nodded to Jack. Nothing personal, Master Chief. Just business. And Shepard, Jack asked? Another figure stepped forward. This one was older, late 50s, gray hair, expensive suit that looked wrong in a warehouse full of rust and dust. Civilian. But the way he moved, the way he watched everyone with calculating eyes, that was intelligence training. That was CIA. Richard Sullivan, the man said, Deputy Director of Operations, Central Intelligence Agency. Retired now, of course. But during my tenure, I provided operational cover for Admiral Garrison's activities, classified them under national security protocols, made sure investigations went nowhere, made sure anyone who asked too many questions got transferred to Alaska. Jack felt his stomach turn. It was worse than he thought. Not just corrupt SEALs. The conspiracy went all the way into the intelligence community, into the machinery of government itself. So now you know, Garrison said. 5 operators, 30 years, $40 million moved through offshore accounts. Weapons sold to anyone who paid. And yes, before you ask, some of that material ended up in the wrong hands. Terrorist cells, insurgent groups, people who used our weapons to kill American soldiers. He said it without remorse, without even acknowledging the weight of what he was confessing. Just stated it as fact, like reading a quarterly financial report. But here's what you need to understand, Jack. Every dollar we made, we earned. We bled for this country, gave it our youth, our health, our sanity. And what did we get in return? A pension that barely covers rent, a government that treats veterans like garbage, a population that thanks us for our service and then forgets we exist. So yes, we took what was ours. We built something that outlasted our service. We secured our futures. And if some terrorist in Fallujah got his hands on a rifle we sold, well, that was going to happen anyway. At least we got paid for it. Jack's hands were still raised, but his fingers were curling into fists. The rage was building, threatening to overwhelm the control he had maintained for 62 years of discipline and training. Cole Hartwell discovered you, Jack said. His voice was level, but underneath it was stone, was cold fury compressed to diamond hardness, and you killed him for it. Garrison's expression shifted. Something like regret flickered across his face, then vanished. Cole was a problem. He found evidence, financial records, photos. He was going to go public. We tried to reason with him, offered him a cut, told him he could walk away rich. But Cole, he was like you, an idealist. Thought honor mattered more than survival. So you murdered him. So we removed the threat. Garrison's voice hardened. We set up the patrol, Route Delta, had Vega plant the IED, timed it perfectly. The explosion should have killed Cole instantly. Clean, painless, no suffering. But he survived, Jack said. Garrison nodded. The blast threw him clear. Broke his legs. Burns. But he was conscious. Aware. Marcus had to finish it. Kane finally spoke. His voice was flat. Empty. I used the knife. He looked at me. Knew what was coming. Said to tell his daughter he loved her. Then I put the blade between his ribs. Straight into the heart. He died in maybe 15 seconds. The words hung in the warehouse like smoke. Like poison gas. Jack could barely see through the red haze of rage that threatened to consume him. But he held on, held to the mission, to the knowledge that every word, every confession was being broadcast live to the world, that these men were destroying themselves with their own arrogance. And Bruno? Jack asked. Cole's dog? Garrison shrugged. The dog was a witness. Animals remember sense, remember trauma. We could not risk it identifying Marcus. So we had to put down, told the vet it was too injured to save. Another murder, another life taken to protect their operation. And they spoke about it like it was a business decision, like killing a loyal dog was just another line item in a ledger of necessary costs. Jack lowered his hands slowly, looked at Ava, still tied to the chair, tape over her mouth, eyes wide with fury and fear. Looked at Ghost throwing himself against cage bars. Looked at 5 men who had worn the same uniform he did, who had taken the same oaths, who had become something so twisted that they could murder their own brothers and sleep soundly. "You are going to prison," Jack said. "All of you. Every word you just said was recorded, broadcast live. By now, millions of people have watched you confess to treason, to murder, to 30 years of betrayal. NCIS has tactical teams surrounding this building. You are finished." For a moment, uncertainty flickered across Garrison's face. He pulled out his phone, checked it, and Jack saw the exact moment when the Admiral realized what had happened. Saw his face go pale, saw his hands start to shake. The screen showed live stream feeds, hundreds of thousands of viewers, comments scrolling past. "Arrest them. Traitors. This is real." My God. The confession had gone viral, was spreading across the internet faster than any attempt to contain it could move. Garrison looked at Sullivan. "You said you could block this. You said you had people monitoring their communications." Sullivan's face was equally pale. "I did. We were monitoring, but he must have set up a dead man's switch. Automated uploads. By the time we detected the broadcast, it had already replicated across multiple platforms. Trying to shut it down now would be like trying to stop the tide." Garrison turned to Jack. His expression had changed. The confidence was gone. What remained was something darker. Desperate. The look of a man who has lost everything and no longer has anything to restrain him. "Then we have nothing to lose," Garrison said quietly. He nodded to Kane. "Kill them. Both of them." Kane raised his rifle, aimed at Jack's chest. His finger moved to the trigger. And then the warehouse exploded with sound and light and violence. The doors burst inward. Flashbang grenades detonated, white phosphorus turning the world into overexposed brilliance that seared retinas and overloaded senses. Smoke poured in, thick and choking, obscuring everything. And through the smoke came voices, amplified by bullhorns, backed by the authority of federal law enforcement. "Federal agents, drop your weapons. Hands in the air. Drop your weapons now." NCIS tactical teams poured through every entrance. 20 operators in full tactical gear, rifles with mounted flashlights cutting through smoke, red laser sights painting targets on chests and foreheads. They moved with the coordinated precision of men who had trained for exactly this scenario, who knew their roles, who executed without hesitation. Kane spun toward the entrance, raised his rifle, got off one shot before 3 NCIS operators put him down. The rounds caught him in the chest, center mass, body armor absorbing some of the impact but not all. He went down hard, rifle clattering across concrete, blood spreading beneath him. Stone pulled his pistol, never even got it fully raised before 2 more operators tackled him, drove him to the ground, wrenched the weapon from his hand, and cuffed him with zip ties so tight they cut circulation. Vega tried to run, made it maybe 10 feet before an operator clotheslined him, sent him sprawling. 3 more agents piled on, securing him, searching him for weapons, and finding 2 knives, a pistol, and a device that looked like a detonator. They bagged it carefully, evidence for the trials that would consume the next year of military justice proceedings. Sullivan froze, hands raised. The experienced bureaucrat understanding that resistance was futile, that his best chance was cooperation and expensive lawyers. An operator shoved him against a wall, searched him, found nothing. Cuffed him anyway. Garrison stood in the center of the chaos, smoke swirling around him, lights flashing. His perfect uniform now seemed absurd, a costume worn by someone playing soldier rather than being one. He reached for his sidearm, but Jack was faster. Jack crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. His knee, the one with shrapnel from Grenada, screamed in protest, but he ignored it. 40 years of pain management, 40 years of pushing through injury. He reached Garrison before the Admiral's fingers touched his holster, grabbed Garrison's wrist, twisted. The joint lock was textbook. Perfect execution. The kind of technique drilled into muscle memory through 10,000 repetitions. Garrison gasped, tried to pull away, but Jack held on, leaned in close, spoke directly into the Admiral's ear. quiet enough that only Garrison could hear. Cole Hartwell was worth 100 of you, and now everyone knows it. Then Jack shoved him toward the waiting NCIS agents. They caught Garrison, spun him around, cuffed him, read him his rights in voices that cut through the chaos with bureaucratic precision. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you. The words that had been spoken over criminals for generations, the ritual of law enforcement, the beginning of a process that would end with these men in cells, with their fortunes seized, with their legacies destroyed. Jack stumbled to where Ava sat tied. His hands shook as he pulled the tape from her mouth, as he cut the zip ties binding her wrists and ankles. She gasped, coughed, then threw her arms around him and held on like she was drowning, and he was the only thing keeping her above water. I thought they were going to kill you, she whispered. I thought I was going to watch you die. Not today. Jack's voice was rough, his chest was tight. The adrenaline that had sustained him through the confrontation was draining now, leaving behind exhaustion and pain and the bone-deep weariness of someone who has carried a burden too long. Not today. An NCIS agent unlocked Ghost's cage. The dog burst out, went straight to Ava, pressed against her legs and whined. She knelt, buried her face in his fur, let herself cry for the first time since her mother died, let herself release the grief and fear and rage she had been containing for weeks. Jack looked around the warehouse, at the 5 men being processed by federal agents, at the evidence being bagged and tagged, at the camera crews arriving, news vans pulling up outside, reporters scrambling to be first with the story that was already trending worldwide. Agent Rebecca Cross approached. She was 48 years old, gray streaking her dark hair, eyes that had seen too much corruption and not enough justice. But tonight those eyes held something like satisfaction. Master Chief Mercer. Her voice was formal, but underneath was respect. You just handed us the biggest military corruption case in 50 years. Every confession recorded, broadcast live, millions of witnesses. Defense attorneys are going to have nightmares trying to fight this. Will it stick? Jack asked. Will they actually go to prison, or will they find some way to classify it, bury it, make it disappear? Cross looked at the camera crews outside, at the phones in every agent's pocket, all of them recording, all of them uploading to cloud storage and social media and news databases. At the internet that had turned one man's confession into global knowledge in the span of 30 minutes. They cannot bury this. It is too public, too viral. The Secretary of Defense is already calling for investigations. The Senate Armed Services Committee is convening emergency hearings. The President is going to have to make a statement. This is too big to hide. She paused. You did it. You finished what Cole started. Jack looked at Ava, at this young woman who had lost her father to greed and corruption and the casual evil of men who valued profit over honor, who had spent years grieving without knowing why, who deserved better, deserved truth, deserved justice. We did it, Jack said. All of us. Cole, Kane, Ava, everyone who refused to forget. They loaded the prisoners into separate vehicles. Garrison went first, his head down, his perfect uniform now rumpled and stained with the dust of a warehouse floor. He did not look at Jack as he passed, did not acknowledge him, just shuffled toward the van with the defeated posture of someone who had lost everything and knew more losses were coming. Kane was carried out on a stretcher. The bullets had not killed him, but had done enough damage that he would spend months recovering before standing trial. Good. Better that he lived to face consequences than died a warrior's death he no longer deserved. Stone, Vega, and Sullivan were processed quickly, loaded into separate vehicles, isolated. Federal prosecutors would play them against each other, offer deals for testimony, build a case so overwhelming that guilty verdicts became inevitable. As the vehicles pulled away, sirens welling into the night, Jack felt something release in his chest, a tension he had been carrying for 11 years. Since the day he got the call that Cole was dead, since the funeral with its folded flag and rifle volleys and lies, since he made a promise to finish what his brother started and then failed that promise every day for more than a decade. Until tonight, the news crews descended, cameras, microphones, reporters shouting questions. Jack ignored them. Let Cross handle the official statement. He took Ava's hand. They walked away from the chaos, away from the lights and noise and the feeding frenzy of media that would dominate headlines for months. They drove back to the storage unit in silence, both of them too exhausted for words, too overwhelmed by what had just happened to process it yet. That would come later, the debriefs, the testimony, the trials, the endless replay of tonight's events as lawyers and judges and journalists picked apart every word, every action, every decision. But for now, they just drove through San Diego in the small hours of morning, when the city was quiet and the streets were empty, and the world felt like it belonged only to them. At the storage unit, Jack made coffee. Bad coffee. The kind soldiers drink in forward operating bases when sleep is a luxury they cannot afford. They sat among the maps and photographs in 11 years of obsession, and they did not speak. Just existed in the shared space of people who had fought together and won. Finally, Ava broke the silence. What happens now? Jack sipped his coffee, considered the question. Trials? Testimony? They will want us to explain everything. How we found the evidence, how we tracked them, how we set up tonight's confrontation. It will take months, maybe years. And after we rebuild. We take what your father started, what came preserved, what we exposed tonight, and we make sure it means something. We push for reforms, better oversight, stricter accountability. We make it harder for the next group of corrupt operators to do what Garrison did. Ava nodded. And the K-9 program? Jack looked at Ghost, sleeping now in the corner, exhausted from the night's violence. The dog's gray muzzle was covered in scratches from throwing himself against the cage. But he was alive, had protected his handler, had done exactly what generations of military dogs had done, served with absolute loyalty even when humans failed them. We honor them. We teach the next generation that dogs are not tools, they are partners, brothers. We make sure no handler ever forgets that the animal beside them is the most honest warrior they will ever know. The sun rose over San Diego, golden light spilling through the storage unit door, illuminating the maps, the evidence, the work of 11 years compressed into one room. Jack stood, walked to the wall where he had pinned Cole's photograph. Young Cole, Grenada Cole, before the world had broken him, before he learned that brothers could betray each other, before he died knowing too much and refusing to stay silent. Jack unpinned the photograph, held it, this image of a man who had been his brother in every way that mattered, who had trusted him, who had asked him for help and been told to wait, to gather more evidence, to not move until the case was airtight. I am sorry, Jack whispered. Sorry I did not believe you sooner. Sorry I was not there when you needed me. Sorry it took me 11 years to finish what should have taken 11 days. But I finished it. They are all going to prison, every one of them. And your daughter, she knows the truth now, knows you died a hero, knows you were right. Ava came to stand beside him, put her hand on his shoulder. He would be proud of you. Jack shook his head. He would be disappointed it took so long. But maybe he would understand. Maybe he would forgive me for being careful when he needed me to be brave. They stood together as the sun climbed higher, as the city woke, as news of last night's arrest spread across the country and the world, as America began to grapple with the reality that some of its most decorated warriors had betrayed everything they claimed to believe in. Jack's phone rang. He looked at the screen. Unknown number. For a moment, he considered not answering, considered letting whoever it was leave a message. But habit was strong, 40 years of answering calls from commanders and teammates and people who needed help. He answered, Mercer. A voice he recognized, rough with age and illness, but still carrying the authority of rank and experience. Master Chief Thaddeus Kane. I saw it, Kane said. Watched the whole thing live. Saw Garrison confess. Saw them all get arrested. You did it, Jack. You actually did it. We did it. You kept the evidence. You gave us the ammunition. Kane was quiet for a moment. I got a call an hour ago, Department of Defense. They want me to testify. Tell them everything I know about the operation, about the times I could have stopped it and did not. They are going to strip my medals, revoke my pension, maybe charge me as an accessory. Jack's jaw tightened. You were a victim. They threatened your family, crippled you. I was complicit. I knew and stayed silent. That makes me guilty. Kane's voice was steady. No regret, no self-pity, just acceptance. But you know what? I am okay with it. I am 66 years old, dying of emphysema. Got maybe a year left. I can spend it in a cell if that is what justice requires. At least I will die knowing I finally did the right thing. You do not deserve prison. Maybe not, but I deserve to face consequences. We all do. That is what accountability means. That is what Cole died believing in. That powerful men should not be above the law just because they wear uniforms and have medals and can invoke national security. Jack heard the wisdom minute. The warrior wisdom that understands sacrifice is not just about dying in combat. Sometimes it is about living with the consequences of your choices, about standing up when it is hard, about accepting punishment when you have earned it. I will testify on your behalf, Jack said. Character witness, explain the threats, the intimidation, make sure they understand you were victimized too. Appreciated, but do not try too hard. I need to live with myself, and the only way I can do that is by facing this head on. No excuses, no justification, just truth. They talked for a few more minutes, made plans for Kane to travel to San Diego for preliminary interviews with federal prosecutors, discussed strategy for the trials that would consume the next year. Then Kane's voice grew tired. The old man needed rest, needed to husband his strength for the battles ahead. Before he hung up, Kane said one more thing. Tell Ava her father would be proud. Tell her he loved her more than anything, and tell her to trust the dogs. They always know who the wolves are. I will. The call ended. Jack stood holding the phone, feeling the weight of everything that had happened, everything still to come. The trials, the testimony, the endless dissection of 30 years of corruption, the reforms that might or might not happen, the promises made by politicians who would forget them as soon as the news cycle moved on. But for now, in this moment, they had won, had exposed the truth, had brought justice to men who thought they were untouchable, had honored the memory of Cole Hartwell and the 7 others who had been murdered to protect a conspiracy built on greed and betrayal. That was something, maybe not everything, but something. Jack looked at Ava. She was checking her phone too, reading messages from Marines she served with, from canine handlers across the military, from people who had heard the news and wanted to reach out, to thank her, to tell her she had done something important, something that mattered. I have been invited to speak at the War Dog Memorial, she said. Arlington. They want me to talk about my father, about what he discovered, about why military dogs deserve better than to be treated as expendable equipment. Will you do it? Ava looked at Ghost, at the old dog who had fought for her tonight, who had been loyal beyond reason, beyond training, beyond anything that could be taught or commanded, who had been a partner when humans failed her. Yes, someone needs to speak for them, for all the Brunos and Ghosts and Lunas, for every dog that served and died and got a footnote in a report instead of the honors they deserved. Jack smiled. Your father would be proud. I hope so. They left the storage unit as the sun reached full morning brightness. San Diego spread below them, city of warriors and sailors and Marines, city that had sent generations to war and welcomed home the survivors and tried to care for the broken. They drove through streets they had known their whole lives, past bases where they had trained, past beaches where they had run in formation before dawn, past the monuments and memorials that honored sacrifice without always examining the corruption that sometimes accompanied it. At a red light, Jack's phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Agent Cross, brief but heavy with implications. Garrison requesting deal. Wants to provide testimony against others in exchange for reduced sentence. Naming names all the way to Pentagon. This is bigger than 5 SEALs. Stand by. Jack showed the text to Ava. She read it. Her expression hardened. How much bigger? Cross's next text provided the answer. A list of names. Admirals, generals, defense contractors, CIA officers, members of Congress who had been paid to look the other way, to block investigations, to protect an operation that had made them all rich. The conspiracy went deeper than even Cole had known, deeper than Kane had suspected. This was not 5 corrupt warriors. This was systemic. This was rot at the core of institutions Americans were taught to trust. We are going to need help, Jack said. Lawyers, journalists, people who cannot be intimidated or bought. This is going to be a long fight. Ava's smile was hard, determined. Good. I am not going anywhere. They drove to Arlington National Cemetery, took a flight that afternoon. Red eye across the country, arrived in Virginia as another dawn broke. This one colder, autumn settling into the capital with the promise of winter ahead. Cole's grave was exactly as Jack remembered it. Simple stone, name, dates, rank, the lie about how he died still carved there. But that would change. Cross had promised that. A new stone, new inscription. Murdered in service to his country, justice served. The truth finally told. Jack and Ava stood together at the grave. Ghost sat between them, old and gray, but still alert, still protective. A warrior to the end. They did not speak, did not need to. Just stood in the presence of someone they had loved. Someone who had been taken from them by greed and corruption and the casual evil of men who valued money over honor. Finally, Ava knelt, placed her hand on the cold stone, spoke directly to her father as if he could hear her, as if the 15 years since his death had not separated them, as if love could reach across whatever divide exists between the living and the dead. We got them, Dad. All of them. They are going to pay for what they did to you, and I am going to make sure every canine handler knows your story, knows what you fought for, knows that you died protecting dogs and the warriors who served beside them. She paused, tears streaming down her face. I miss you every single day, but I am okay. Uncle Jack made sure of that. Mom made sure of that. And now I am going to make sure your death meant something, that your sacrifice changed things. Jack placed his hand on her shoulder, felt her grief, shared it. They had both lost Cole. They had both spent years carrying the weight of his absence. But now, finally, they had given him what he deserved. Truth, justice, memory. A bugler appeared on a hill overlooking the graves. Distant figure in dress uniform. He raised his instrument. The first notes of taps drifted across Arlington, that mournful melody that accompanies every military funeral, that speaks of sacrifice and loss and the debt owed to those who serve. Day is done. Gone the sun. From the lakes, from the hills, from the sky. All is well. Safely rest. God is nigh. The notes faded into silence, into the endless quiet of a cemetery where warriors sleep, where honor is remembered even when it is betrayed, where the dead wait for the living to finish the fights they started. Jack saluted, held it, felt the weight of 40 years of service, 40 years of brotherhood and betrayal, 40 years of trying to be the kind of warrior his country needed and falling short more often than he succeeded. But today, this morning, standing at his brother's grave with that brother's daughter beside him, Jack Mercer felt something he had not felt in 11 years. Peace, not because the fight was over. It was not. The trials would take years. The reforms would be fought by people with power and money and lawyers. The corruption would resist being exposed, would fight to survive, would find new ways to hide. But the truth was out, Cole's truth, the truth he died protecting, and that truth was spreading, was changing minds, was forcing America to examine the rot within its most sacred institutions. That was enough. For now, it was enough. They left Arlington as morning light painted the headstones gold, drove back to the airport, back to San Diego, back to lives that would never be the same but could maybe finally move forward. On the plane somewhere over the Midwest, Ava fell asleep against Jack's shoulder, exhausted from days without rest, from the emotional toll of watching her father's murderers confess and be arrested, from the release of grief held too long. Jack stayed awake, watching clouds through the window, thinking about Cole, about Cain, about the generations of warriors who had served with honor and the few who had betrayed that honor, about the cost of justice and the price of truth and the weight of promises kept too late. His phone buzzed, another text from Cross, this one with an attachment, video file. He opened it. Helmet camera footage, high definition, recent. The timestamp was from earlier that day. A raid. Federal agents storming a compound, arresting more people. The video showed faces Jack recognized from Cole's files. Defense contractors, mid-level Pentagon officials. The branches of Garrison's conspiracy being cut away one by one. Cross's message was simple. It is happening. All of it. Everyone connected is being brought in. We are cleaning house. Jack watched the video to the end, then deleted it. Some things he did not need to keep. Some things he could let go. The investigation was in good hands now. Professional hands. People who had resources and authority and would finish what he and Ava had started. His job was done. Cole Hartwell could rest. And maybe, finally, so could he. The military courtroom sat in the basement of Building 1, Naval Station San Diego, a space designed for proceedings that needed to happen away from public scrutiny, where the machinery of military justice could operate without the glare of cameras and protesters and families demanding answers. But nothing about the Garrison trial was hidden. Nothing about it was quiet. The overflow crowd spilled into hallways, into conference rooms where closed-circuit feeds played on screens, into the parking lots where news vans had been camped for 3 weeks, running live coverage of testimony that was redefining how America understood corruption within its military. Jack Mercer sat in the front row of the gallery, same seat he had occupied every day since the trial began. 62 years old, back straight, despite the pain that radiated from his spine down through his bad knee, despite the exhaustion that came from 3 weeks of hearing details he had spent 11 years trying to uncover. Beside him, Ava Hartwell in her marine dress blues, Staff Sergeant chevrons gleaming on her collar. She had taken leave from her K-9 unit to be here, to bear witness, to make sure her father's murderers faced consequences with at least one member of the Hartwell family present to see justice delivered. The prosecution table was crowded. Lead prosecutor Captain Jennifer Walsh, 38 years old, JAG Corps, with a reputation for dismantling defenses like a surgeon removing cancer. She had built a career on corruption cases, on holding senior officers accountable when everyone else wanted to look away. Behind her, 3 assistants, all of them surrounded by boxes of evidence, laptops displaying documents, the physical weight of 30 years of treason compressed into paper and digital files. The defense table looked equally formidable. Garrison had hired civilian counsel, the best money could buy. Marcus Rothstein, legendary defense attorney, 70 years old, with silver hair and a voice that could make juries doubt their own memories. He sat beside Garrison, who wore his dress uniform stripped of all ribbons, all insignia, reduced to plain cloth that marked him as a defendant rather than a decorated admiral. Garrison's face was gaunt. 3 weeks in pre-trial detention had hollowed him out, carved shadows under his eyes, turned his skin gray. The judge was Rear Admiral Patricia Hendricks, 56 years old, appointed to the military appellate bench after 30 years of service that included deployment to every major conflict since Desert Storm. She had a reputation for fairness and an absolute intolerance for bullshit. When lawyers tried to delay or obfuscate or play procedural games, she shut them down with the precision of someone who understood that justice delayed is justice denied. She entered now, everyone rising as she took her seat behind the bench. Her black robes a stark contrast to the military uniforms filling the courtroom. She sat. Everyone else followed. "This court is in session," she said. Her voice carried the authority of rank and 3 decades of commanding respect. "We will continue with the prosecution's witness list. Captain Walsh, you may proceed." Walsh stood. "Thank you, Your Honor. The prosecution calls Master Chief Thaddeus Kane." The courtroom doors opened. 2 MPs wheeled Kane inside. The old warrior still confined to his wheelchair, oxygen tank strapped to the back, tubes running to his nose. But despite his physical condition, despite the illness eating away at his lungs, Kane sat upright, shoulders square, eyes clear, ready to tell his truth. They positioned him beside the witness stand. A bailiff administered the oath. Kane raised his right hand, finger steady, and swore to tell the truth. The whole truth. Nothing but the truth. The same oath he had taken 66 years ago when he enlisted. The same promise he had broken by staying silent for 11 years. Now he would make it right. Walsh approached. "Master Chief Kane, you served with Admiral Garrison for how long?" 40 years, Kane said. His voice was rough but clear. "We went through Bud/S together in 1982. Served in the same teams, same platoons. He was my commanding officer in Panama, my friend. And during those 40 years, did you witness Admiral Garrison engage in criminal activities?" "Yes, multiple times, starting in Grenada, 1983, and continuing through his retirement planning in 2020. Walsh nodded. "Let us start with Grenada. What did you observe?" Kane took a breath. The oxygen hissed. "October 25th, 1983, we secured Point Salines Airport, found a Cuban arms cache. I watched Lieutenant Garrison, as he was ranked then, take a Soviet Makarov pistol. Pocket it, souvenir, he said. I should have stopped him, should have reported it, but I did not. That was my first failure." Jack watched Kane's face, saw the weight of decades pressing down on him. This confession was costing something. Pride, dignity, the image of himself as a warrior who had served with honor. But Kane pushed forward anyway, because facing consequences mattered more than protecting ego. "And Panama?" Walsh asked. "1989, what did you witness there?" Kane described it. The night operation, the chaos as Noriega's regime collapsed, the warehouse full of cartel money, Garrison approaching him and Cole Hartwell and Jack Mercer with a proposition. Take what was ours. Fund operations the politicians would not approve. "I took money that night," Kane said. $200,000. I justified it as operational funding. Told myself it would save American lives. But really I just wanted it. Wanted security. Wanted to know I would not end up old and broken and dependent on a government that treats veterans like garbage. His voice cracked. That was my second failure. And it started a pattern. Every deployment after that, Garrison would approach me. Offer a cut, and I would take it. Not always, not every time, but enough. Enough that I became complicit. Enough that when Cole Hartwell discovered what we were doing and wanted to expose it, I was too compromised to back him up. Walsh let the silence hold. Let the courtroom absorb what Kane was saying. This was not just testimony against Garrison. This was a confession, a public acknowledgement of guilt from a man who knew he could face charges himself. "Master Chief Kane," Walsh said gently, "when did you realize the operation had evolved beyond stealing souvenirs and skimming money?" 2008, maybe 2009. Cole showed me photographs. Shipping manifests for equipment that should have been destroyed. Financial records showing millions moving through offshore accounts. And then he showed me something worse. Walsh pulled up an image on the courtroom screens. Helmet camera footage. The same footage Jack had seen in Kane's hospital room. Crates marked with radiation symbols. Metal cylinders with Cyrillic lettering. "What are we looking at, Master Chief?" "Weapons-grade plutonium, 10 kilograms. Captured in a raid on a Taliban compound. Cole was on that raid. He saw what was in those crates. And 3 days later, when he checked the after-action report, those crates were not mentioned. They had been erased from official records. Because someone took them." Kane nodded. "Because Garrison's operation had reached a new level. They were not just moving conventional weapons anymore. They were trafficking in materials that could be used to build dirty bombs. Materials that could poison entire cities. Kill millions." His voice dropped. "That was when I knew we had crossed a line we could never uncross. That was when I should have gone to authorities, should have exposed everything. But I was scared. Garrison had shown me photographs of my daughter, my grandchildren, told me what would happen if I talked." Walsh's expression softened. "What happened when you tried to speak up?" "April 2012, 6 months after Cole was murdered. I contacted the Inspector General's office, requested a meeting, told them I had information about corruption within JSOC. Before the meeting could happen, 2 men came to see me. Civilian clothes but military bearing. They did not identify themselves. Just told me the meeting was canceled, that I should forget about Cole, that accidents happen to people who ask too many questions. And then Kane's hands gripped the wheelchair armrests, and then they threw me down a stairwell, broke my spine at L3, L4, paralyzed me from the waist down, left me alive so I could spend every day remembering what happens to people who threaten powerful men." The courtroom was absolutely silent. Even Rothstein, the defense attorney known for objecting to everything, sat quiet. Some testimony was too powerful to interrupt. Some truth too heavy to diminish with procedural games. Walsh turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the prosecution has no further questions, but we would like to enter Master Chief Kane's testimony, along with all supporting documentation, as Exhibit 47 through 63. "So entered," Judge Hendricks said. She looked at Rothstein. "Cross-examination?" The defense attorney stood, walked slowly toward Kane. His expression was careful, measured. He knew he was dealing with someone the jury would sympathize with. An old warrior, crippled, dying, confessing his own crimes even as he testified against others. "Master Chief Kane," Rothstein began, his voice soft, "you admit to taking money from this alleged operation. You admit to being compromised. You admit to staying silent even after Master Chief Hartwell was killed. Given your own guilt, your own complicity, why should this court believe anything you say?" Kane met his eyes. "Because I have nothing to gain and everything to lose. I am 66 years old, dying of emphysema. By testifying here, I am guaranteeing that I will be charged as an accessory, will lose my pension, will die in prison. I am doing this not to save myself, but to honor the memory of a man who was braver than I was. A man who saw evil and refused to stay silent, even when it cost him his life. Rothstein tried another angle. Is it not true that you and Master Chief Mercer, sitting in this courtroom right now, have been working together for months to build this case? That you have coordinated your testimony? That this is all an elaborate conspiracy to take down decorated officers? Kane shook his head. Jack Mercer spent 11 years investigating Cole's death. I spent 11 years hiding from my guilt. We only connected 6 weeks ago. And the evidence we presented, the financial records, the video footage, the confession broadcast live, none of that was manufactured. It was truth. Truth that men like Garrison spent 30 years trying to bury. Rothstein pressed on for another 20 minutes, tried to find inconsistencies, tried to paint Kane as unreliable, as motivated by revenge or jealousy or any emotion other than conscience. But Kane did not waver, did not contradict himself, just answered each question with the steady calm of someone who had made peace with consequences. Finally, Rothstein gave up. No further questions. Kane was wheeled out. As he passed Jack's seat, their eyes met. No words. Just a moment of understanding between two men who had both failed Cole Hartwell, but were trying in their own ways to make amends. The trial continued for another week. Prosecutors called dozens of witnesses, NCIS agents who had traced financial transactions, cryptographers who had decoded communications, Navy personnel who testified about equipment that went missing under Garrison's watch. Each witness adding another brick to a wall of evidence, so overwhelming that the defense could only chip at edges, could only try to create reasonable doubt in a case where doubt seemed impossible. And then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The prosecution called their final witness, Master Chief Jack Mercer. Jack stood, walked to the witness stand with the measured pace of someone who had spent 40 years marching in formation, who knew how to move with dignity even when every step hurt. He was sworn in, took his seat, looked out at the courtroom, at the faces watching him, at Garrison sitting at the defense table with an expression that mixed hatred and something like resignation. Walsh began with background, asked Jack about his service record, his relationship with Cole Hartwell, the 11 years he spent investigating after Cole's murder, the evidence he gathered piece by piece while the system tried to stop him. Then she shifted. Master Chief Mercer, on the night of November 8, 2024, you entered Building 47 at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. What happened there? Jack described it. The confrontation, Garrison's confession broadcast live to millions of viewers. The threats, the weapons, the moment when NCIS tactical teams breached and ended 30 years of conspiracy with flashbangs and handcuffs. Walsh played the video, the full recording from Jack's button camera. The courtroom watched Garrison explain how he had evolved from taking souvenirs in Grenada to trafficking weapons-grade plutonium. Watched him describe Cole's murder with the casual indifference of someone discussing a business transaction. Watched him threaten Ava, threaten Jack, reveal the depth of corruption that reached all the way to the Pentagon. When the video ended, the courtroom sat in stunned silence. Walsh turned to Jack. In your opinion, Master Chief Mercer, based on 40 years of service and 11 years of investigation, was Master Chief Cole Hartwell murdered to protect this criminal operation? Yes, no question. Cole discovered evidence that would have exposed them all. He threatened their profits, their freedom, their comfortable retirements built on blood money. So they killed him, staged it to look like combat, and then they spent 11 years making sure no one asked hard questions. And the dog, Cole's canine partner Bruno, murdered too. 3 days after Cole, put down because he was a witness. Because dogs remember sense, remember trauma. They could not risk Bruno identifying his handler's killers. Walsh nodded. Thank you, Master Chief. No further questions. Rothstein approached for cross-examination. He tried the same tactics he had used on Kane. Suggested bias, suggested obsession, suggested that Jack had spent 11 years building a conspiracy theory rather than accepting the official version of events. But Jack did not break, did not waver, just answered each question with facts, with evidence, with the calm certainty of someone who had lived with truth long enough to know it from every angle. Finally, Rothstein played his last card. Master Chief Mercer, is it not true that you were forced into retirement? That your superiors deemed you unfit for duty because of your obsessive investigation? That you have an axe to grind against the military establishment? Jack smiled. Thin and cold. Yes, I was forced out because I refused to stop asking questions about my brother's murder. I was deemed unfit because I would not accept lies dressed up as classified reports. And yes, I have an axe to grind, not against the military, against corruption, against men who wear uniforms and claim to serve while they betray everything those uniforms represent. He leaned forward. You want to know the difference between me and your client? I spent 11 years trying to expose the truth. He spent 30 years trying to bury it. I lost my career for asking questions. He built his career on blood money. And now, finally, he is being held accountable. That is not obsession. That is justice. The courtroom erupted in applause. Judge Hendricks gavelled for order, but even she seemed moved by Jack's words. Rothstein had no response, just returned to his seat, defeat written across his face. The trial moved to closing arguments. Walsh delivered a masterful summary of evidence, 30 years of financial records, testimony from dozens of witnesses, video of Garrison's own confession, a case so airtight that reasonable doubt became impossible. Rothstein tried, gave an impassioned speech about the presumption of innocence, about the burden of proof, about how even decorated officers deserve fair trials. But his heart was not in it. He knew his client was guilty. The whole world knew. The only question was what punishment would be imposed. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, came back with a verdict read by the foreman, a Marine colonel who had served in Iraq and Afghanistan, who understood military culture, who knew what these crimes meant. On the charge of conspiracy to commit treason, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of theft of government property, guilty. On the charge of illegal arms trafficking, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty. The list went on, 23 counts, guilty on all of them. Garrison stood as the verdicts were read. His face showed nothing, no emotion, no remorse, just the blank expression of someone who had calculated wrong, who had believed power would protect him, who was learning that even admirals fall when the evidence is overwhelming. Judge Hendricks scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. Garrison was remanded to custody. As MPs led him away, he looked at Jack one final time. Their eyes met across the courtroom. No words, just the acknowledgement that one of them had won and one had lost, and nothing would ever change that. The sentencing hearing was brief. Walsh recommended life imprisonment without possibility of parole. Rothstein argued for leniency based on Garrison's decades of service, his age, his medical conditions. Judge Hendricks listened to both sides, then delivered her ruling. Admiral Garrison, you betrayed every oath you ever took. You enriched yourself while men under your command died. You murdered a brother officer to protect your crimes, and you corrupted the institutions Americans trust to keep them safe. No length of prior service can excuse what you have done. No number of ribbons or medals can balance the scales. She paused. This court sentences you to life imprisonment at the United States Disciplinary Barracks, Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. You will never wear a uniform again. You will never salute a flag again. You will die in a cell, forgotten, with your legacy destroyed and your name synonymous with betrayal. Garrison was led away. The courtroom emptied. Jack and Ava remained sitting in the quiet space where justice had finally been delivered. After 11 years, after countless setbacks, after moments when it seemed impossible that truth would ever emerge from beneath the weight of power and corruption. But it had. Truth had won. The other trials followed similar patterns. Marcus Kane, Derek Stone, Michael Vega, all convicted on multiple counts, all sentenced to decades in military prison. Richard Sullivan, the CIA officer, was tried in federal court rather than military tribunal. His trial revealed even more. Classified operations that should never have been approved. Congressional oversight deliberately circumvented. A systemic rot that went far beyond 5 SEALs stealing weapons. Sullivan's testimony, given in exchange for a reduced sentence, named names that made headlines for months. 3 sitting senators, 5 defense contractors, 2 generals. An admiral who had retired 5 years earlier, but whose corruption during active duty made him liable for prosecution. The scandal consumed Washington, Senate hearings, Inspector General investigations, reforms promised and sometimes even delivered. New oversight mechanisms, stricter accountability for equipment, better protection for whistleblowers. Some of it was theater, political posturing, but some of it was real change. And Jack, watching from San Diego, allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, Cole's death had bought something valuable, had forced America to examine its military in ways that were uncomfortable but necessary. 6 months after the trials ended, Jack received a phone call. Unknown number. He almost did not answer. Tired of journalists requesting interviews, tired of documentary filmmakers wanting to tell his story. But something made him accept. The voice was weak, labored breathing in the background, but unmistakable. Jack, it is Thaddeus. Kane. Jack's chest tightened. Where are you? VA hospital. Portland. Same room you visited a year ago. They transferred me back after my testimony. I have maybe a week left, maybe less. Lungs are shot. But I wanted to call, wanted to thank you. For what? For finishing it. For not letting my cowardice stop you. For giving me a chance to do the right thing before I died. Jack sat down. His apartment suddenly felt too quiet, too empty. You did do the right thing. Your testimony helped convict them. Without you, Garrison might have walked. Kane laughed. A wet sound. Painful. I like to think that, but we both know the truth. Cole's evidence was enough. My testimony just added weight, but it felt good, felt like I was finally the warrior I always claimed to be. Silence on the line, just breathing, the hiss of oxygen, the electronic beep of monitors tracking a body shutting down. I am scared, Jack, Kane said quietly. Not of dying, but of what comes after. Of facing Cole. Of having to explain why I stayed silent for 11 years while his daughter grew up without him. Tell him the truth. Tell him you were human, flawed, scared, but that you came through when it mattered. That is all any of us can do. Kane was quiet for a long moment. Then, take care of Ava and Ghost and all the handlers coming up. Make sure they know dogs are not equipment. They are brothers. They deserve better than what we gave Bruno. I will, I promise. The call ended. Kane died 3 days later, alone in his hospital room. No family present. They had disowned him after his testimony became public. Unwilling to associate with a man who admitted to corruption, even as he exposed greater corruption. Jack flew to Portland for the funeral. Small affair. A handful of veterans who remembered Kane from before the wheelchair, before the guilt, before the compromise. They buried him in a civilian cemetery, not Arlington. Kane had requested that, had said he did not deserve to rest among heroes when he had failed to be one when it mattered most. But Jack thought differently, thought that facing consequences, admitting guilt, testifying against powerful men even when it destroyed your own legacy, that was a kind of heroism too. The hardest kind, the kind that required sacrificing not just your life, but your reputation, your self-image, everything you wanted to believe about yourself. Kane had done that. In the end, he had chosen truth over comfort, and maybe that was enough. 2 months later, Ava called Jack. Her voice was excited. Uncle Jack, they approved it. The memorial. It is happening. What memorial? The K9 Memorial. At Arlington. They are dedicating a section to military working dogs. Bruno is going to be listed, along with every other dog killed in action. Every dog that gave their life serving alongside warriors. Jack felt something warm in his chest, something that might have been hope. When? Next month. Memorial Day. They want us to speak, both of us, about Dad, about what he fought for, about why dogs deserve recognition. I will be there. The day arrived, Memorial Day 2/25. Arlington National Cemetery under blue skies and the weight of remembrance. The new K9 Memorial sat on a hillside overlooking the rows of white headstones. Bronze statue of a German shepherd in tactical vest, alert and loyal. Around the base, plaques listing names of dogs killed in action. Hundreds of them. Decades of service compressed into bronze and stone. Bruno's name was there. Jack found it. Ran his fingers over the engraved letters. German shepherd. Killed in action, October 18, 2011, Kandahar Province, Afghanistan. Loyal to the end. The ceremony began. Dignitaries spoke. Secretary of Defense, Commandant of the Marine Corps, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, all of them praising the sacrifice of military working dogs, promising that future generations would be treated better, that reforms would ensure these animals received the care and respect they deserved. Some of it was sincere, some was political theater. Jack had been around long enough to tell the difference. Then it was Ava's turn. She walked to the podium in her dress blues, Ghost at her side. The old dog moved slowly now, hips stiff with arthritis, but still maintained perfect heel position. Still served even when service hurt. Ava spoke about her father, about a man who believed dogs were not equipment but partners, who had died trying to expose corruption that treated animals as expendable assets, who had left behind a daughter and a legacy that demanded better. My father used to say, "Trust the dogs. They know who the wolves are." For years, I did not understand what he meant, but now I do. Dogs see us as we really are, not our rank, not our ribbons, not the stories we tell about ourselves. They see our character, our integrity, whether we are worthy of their loyalty. She paused. Let the words sink in. And the truth is, we have not been worthy. We have sent dogs into danger and then euthanized them when they became inconvenient. We have trained them to kill and then abandoned them when they developed PTSD. We have taken their absolute loyalty and repaid it with indifference. Her voice hardened, but that changes now. My father died to expose corruption, to force us to examine how we treat our warriors. And that examination includes the four-legged warriors who serve beside us, who save our lives, who ask nothing in return except food and affection and the chance to serve again tomorrow. She looked out at the crowd, hundreds of people, families of fallen soldiers, veterans, active duty personnel, and scattered among them canine handlers with their dogs, warriors who understood what she was saying, who had lived the bond she was describing. So today we honor not just Bruno, we honor every military working dog who ever served, every dog who died in action, every dog who came home broken and deserved better care, every mom who is serving right now somewhere overseas, protecting handlers who depend on them absolutely. And we make a promise that going forward, we will be worthy of their loyalty, that we will treat them as the warriors they are, that when they give us everything, we will give them the honor and care they deserve in return. She stepped back from the podium. The crowd stood, applauded, and Jack, watching his niece command that moment with her father's courage, felt pride so overwhelming it nearly broke him. Then it was his turn. He had not prepared remarks, had thought about what to say but never wrote anything down. He walked to the podium, looked out at the crowd, took a breath. I am Master Chief Jack Mercer. Retired, I served 40 years, most of that time alongside Cole Hartwell, the man who is Ava's father, the man who discovered a conspiracy that made powerful men rich while warriors died, the man who was murdered for refusing to stay silent. He paused. Cole's grave is 50 yards from here. I visited it this morning, placed dog tags on the headstone, Bruno's tags, the dog who died 3 days after his handler, murdered to protect the same conspiracy. Jack's voice was steady, but underneath was steel. For 11 years, I investigated Cole's death. For 11 years, I was told to let it go, to accept the official version, to stop being obsessed. But I could not, because I knew my brother, knew he would not have walked into an ambush unprepared, knew something was wrong. And I was right. Cole was murdered by men who wore the same uniform we did, by men who claimed to serve while they betrayed everything service means. And for 11 years, they walked free, got promoted, got rich, slept soundly while Cole's daughter grew up without a father. He looked directly at Ava, but his daughter did not accept it, did not let them win. She joined the Marines, became a canine handler like her father, and together we exposed them, brought them to justice, made sure Cole's death meant something. Jack's voice dropped. This memorial, these reforms, the recognition that dogs deserve better, all of it came because one man saw wrong and refused to stay silent, even when it cost him everything, even when it meant leaving behind a daughter and a wife and a legacy that would take years to vindicate. So when you see this memorial, when you read these names, remember why it exists. Remember that change comes when warriors have courage, when they fight not just against external enemies, but against corruption within their own ranks, when they trust the dogs, because dogs always know who the wolves are. He stepped back. The crowd stood again. This time the applause lasted longer, and when it finally faded, a bugler appeared on the hillside, played taps, that mournful melody that accompanies every military funeral, every memorial, every moment when America acknowledges the debt it owes to those who serve. After the ceremony, people approached Jack and Ava, shook hands, thanked them, shared stories of their own days, their own losses, their own fights against systems that did not value what they valued. It went on for hours, the sun setting over Arlington, gold light washing across white headstones, another day ending, another set of promises made. Whether those promises would be kept remained to be seen. Jack and Ava walked together to Cole's grave. The new headstone was in place. Master Chief Cole Hartwell, 1970 to 2011. Murdered in service to his country. Justice served 2024. Trust the dogs. Ghost lay down beside the stone. The old dog's breathing was labored. His muzzle was more gray than black now, but his eyes were still alert, still watching over his handler and her family. Ava knelt, placed her hand on the stone. Dad, we did it. Everything you fought for, everything you died protecting. It meant something. The trials are over, the guilty are in prison, and dogs are finally being honored the way you always said they should be. Jack stood beside her, added his own silent promise. I kept my word, Cole. Protected your daughter, finished what you started. Maybe it took too long. Maybe I should have believed you sooner, but I got there. We got there. They stayed until dark, until the cemetery closed and groundskeepers began their rounds. Then they walked to the parking lot, drove back to their hotel. Tomorrow they would fly back to San Diego, back to their lives, back to the work of training new handlers and pushing for reforms and making sure Cole's death continued to matter. But tonight, in this moment, they had earned rest, had earned the peace that comes from knowing you fought hard, fought smart, and won. The war was over. The wolves had been identified, the pack was safe, and Cole Hartwell could finally rest. 2 years after the trials ended, Jack Mercer sat on the porch of a small house in Montana, watching snow fall across mountains that stretched toward a horizon unmarked by roads or cities or the machinery of war. The house was simple. 2 bedrooms, wood stove, 40 acres of silence broken only by wind and wildlife, and the occasional bark of a dog who still believed his job was to protect even when there was nothing left to protect against. Ghost lay at Jack's feet, the Belgian Malinois now 12 years old, gray muzzle resting on paws that trembled with arthritis, eyes clouded by cataracts but still tracking movement with the instinct of a warrior who had never learned to retire. The dog's breathing was labored, had been for months. The veterinarian in Missoula had said 6 months, maybe less. The cancer was spreading. Lungs, liver, the price paid by animals bred and trained to work until their bodies failed them. Jack reached down, stroked the dog's head. Ghost's tail thumped once against the wooden porch. Weak but still present, still trying to show loyalty even when loyalty had cost him everything. Good boy, Jack whispered. You have been the best boy. The snow continued to fall. Montana winter settling in with the inevitability of seasons that care nothing for human plans or animal suffering. Just the turn of the earth, the movement of time, the reality that everything alive eventually stops. Jack was 64 now, 2 years since he had stood in that courtroom and watched Admiral Frank Garrison be sentenced to life imprisonment. 2 years since the conspiracy had been exposed and the guilty punished, and America had promised reforms that some had kept and others had quietly abandoned once the news cycle moved on. He had retired to Montana because California held too many ghosts, too many memories of Cole, of battles fought, of promises made and sometimes broken. He needed distance, needed quiet, needed to learn how to exist in a world where his mission was complete and his purpose fulfilled, and what remained was just a long decline toward whatever comes after. But the phone still rang, still pulled him back into the world he had tried to leave. It rang now, the ringtone Ava had set up for herself. Jack answered. Uncle Jack. Her voice was steady, but underneath was tension. Can you talk? Always. What is wrong? Nothing is wrong. Just, I need advice, and you are the only person who understands. Jack waited. Let her find the words. They are shutting it down, Ava said. The K-9 reform program, the oversight committee, the new training protocols. All of it. Budget cuts, they say, reallocating resources to higher priorities. But I know what it really is. It is pushback from people who never wanted reform in the first place, who see dogs as equipment and cannot stand the idea of treating them any other way. Jack felt anger stir in his chest. Old anger, the kind that had sustained him through 11 years of investigation, when everyone told him to quit, when the system fought him at every turn, when powerful men did everything they could to bury truth under classified reports and national security claims. What do you need from me? He asked. I need to know if I should fight, if I should make noise, go to the media, force them to explain why they are abandoning promises made at Arlington, or if I should accept it, save my career, live to fight another day. Jack looked at Ghost. At this dog who had served until service destroyed him, who had given everything and received in return a comfortable death on a porch in Montana rather than euthanasia in a military kennel when he became inconvenient. A small mercy, better than most military working dogs received, but still not enough. Still not what absolute loyalty deserved. Fight, Jack said. Always fight. Cole fought even when it cost him his life. Kane fought even when it cost him his legacy. I fought for 11 years when everyone said I was crazy. And we won. Not because we were stronger or smarter or had more resources. We won because we refused to quit. He paused. You are Cole's daughter. You have his courage, his refusal to accept wrong just because it is convenient for powerful people. So yes, fight, make them explain, force them to own their betrayal. And if they destroy your career for it, then you will have lost nothing that matters. Because a career built on silence is not worth having. Ava was quiet for a moment. Then her voice came back stronger. Okay, I will fight. But Jack, I am scared. Scared I will end up like my father, killed for asking questions, erased for being inconvenient. That is a real possibility. But being scared and doing it anyway, that is what courage is. Your father was terrified the night before his final patrol. He told me so, said he knew something was wrong, knew they were planning to move against him. But he went anyway, because the alternative was staying silent. And silence, for men like Cole, for warriors like you, is a death worse than any IED. Thank you, Uncle Jack. Call me after. Let me know how it goes. The call ended. Jack sat holding the phone, thinking about courage, about the cost of speaking truth to power, about how each generation has to learn these lessons again because forgetting is easier than remembering. Ghost whined, a soft sound. Not pain exactly, more like awareness that something was ending, that the long service was almost over. Jack picked up the dog, carried him inside, laid him on the bed they shared, covered him with a blanket, sat beside him and waited. The dog's breathing slowed, each breath a little more labored than the last. The cancer was winning, had been winning for months. The veterinarian had offered treatments, chemotherapy, radiation, procedures that might buy another 6 months of diminished life. But Jack had said no, had chosen comfort over duration, had given Ghost painkillers and soft beds in the knowledge that his handler was near. That was all any warrior could ask for, to die with dignity, to die knowing they were loved, to die in the presence of their pack. Ghost's eyes found Jack's face, held there, and in that moment, Jack saw everything the dog had been. Partner, brother, protector, the animal who had thrown himself against cage bars to save Ava, who had attacked an admiral to defend his pack, who had served with absolute loyalty even when humans failed to deserve it. Thank you, Jack whispered. Thank you for everything. You were the best of us. Ghost's tail moved once, barely visible. Then his breathing stopped. The stillness that followed was absolute, the kind of quiet that means a life has ended and the world has shifted in small ways that most people never notice but warriors feel in their bones. Jack sat with the body for an hour, just being present, honoring the fallen the way warriors do, with silence, with witness, with the acknowledgement that this death mattered even if no one else would ever know. Then he wrapped Ghost in a blanket, carried him outside, buried him on the hillside overlooking the valley, marked the grave with stones, no marker, no name, just a place where a warrior could rest beneath Montana sky. He stood over the grave as snow fell, thinking about all the warriors he had buried. Cole, Kane, Bruno, Ghost, and thousands more whose names he never knew but whose sacrifice he carried anyway. That was the weight of being a survivor, carrying the dead, remembering when others forgot, bearing witness to lives that mattered even when the world moved on. His phone buzzed. Text from Ava, one word. Done. Jack called her. What happened? I went to the oversight committee, brought documentation, photos of dogs that served and then were euthanized when they became inconvenient, testimony from handlers about inadequate medical care, statistics showing how often military working dogs are abandoned after their service ends. And they listened. Then they voted. The reforms stay. Full funding restored. They said they could not justify cutting programs dedicated to animals that save American lives. One of the senators, combat veteran, said his life was saved by a K9 in Fallujah. He was not going to let bureaucrats dishonor that dog's memory. Ava's voice brightened. Jack, we won. Again, we actually won. Jack felt something release in his chest. Some tension he had been carrying since the moment Ghost stopped breathing. Maybe the dog's death had not been meaningless. Maybe it was the last battle in a long war, the final sacrifice that tipped scales toward justice. Your father would be proud, Jack said. He fought for this, died for it, and now you are making sure his death continues to matter. What about you? Ava asked. What will you do now? Stay in Montana? Hide from the world? Jack looked at the grave on the hillside, at the snow-covering stones that marked where a warrior rested. I think I am done hiding, done running. I think it is time to make sure people remember, not just Cole, not just the conspiracy, but all of it. The whole truth about what military service costs, about what we ask of warriors, human and animal, and how often we fail to honor that sacrifice. What does that mean? It means I am going to write, tell the story, all of it, from Grenada to the trials to right now. Make sure the next generation understands what happened, why it matters, how corruption grows when good people stay silent. Ava was quiet then. I think that is exactly what you should do. And Jack, thank you for everything, for believing my father, for finishing what he started, for teaching me that courage means fighting even when you are scared. You taught yourself that. I just reminded you it was already there. The call ended. Jack stood on the porch watching snow fall across Montana wilderness, thinking about stories, about how narratives shape understanding, about how truth survives through telling and retelling until it becomes part of the collective memory that defines who we are. He went inside, opened his laptop, started writing. The first chapter was about Grenada, about young warriors who thought they were invincible, about the moment when one of them learned that rules could be broken and no one would stop him, about how small compromises lead to larger betrayals, how taking a souvenir pistol eventually leads to trafficking weapons-grade plutonium. He wrote about Panama, about cartel money and regime change, and the chaos that creates opportunities for men without conscience, about being approached with an offer and saying no, and watching brothers say yes. He wrote about the Gulf War, about desert operations and captured depots and equipment that disappeared from manifests, about the evolution of an operation from opportunistic theft to systematic conspiracy. He wrote about Cole, about a friendship that spanned 40 years, about trust and betrayal, about the night Cole came to him with evidence and Jack said, wait, gather more proof, do not move until the case is airtight, about how that caution killed his brother. He wrote about 11 years of investigation, about being told he was crazy, about forced retirement, about the moment he found Cole's journal and realized his brother had known he was walking toward death and gone anyway because staying silent was worse than dying. He wrote about Cain, about a warrior crippled for trying to speak truth, about 11 years of fear and guilt and the final redemption of testimony that cost everything and bought justice. He wrote about Ava, about a daughter who lost her father and spent years not knowing why, about courage inherited and refined, about finishing what others started. And he wrote about Ghost, about Bruno, about every military working dog who served with loyalty absolute and received in return inadequate care, insufficient honor, and deaths that came too soon and too alone. The writing took 6 months. Every day he sat at the kitchen table in Montana and poured out decades of memory onto pages that became chapters, that became a book. He called it Trust the Dogs, Cole's last words, the wisdom that had guided everything after. Publishers competed to release it, major houses offering advances, marketing campaigns, book tours. But Jack chose a small military press, veterans-owned, veterans-run, people who understood that some stories need to be told even when they do not make millions, even when they do not become bestsellers, because the telling matters more than the profit. The book released on Memorial Day 2027, 3 years after the trials, 3 years after Garrison's conviction, 3 years after promises were made at Arlington that dogs would be honored. Reviews were strong. Veterans recognized the truth in it, the authentic voice of someone who had lived this story rather than researching it from comfortable distance. The book climbed military reading lists, was assigned in leadership courses at service academies, became required reading for K-9 handlers. But more importantly, it changed conversations. made it harder for bureaucrats to cut funding for working dog programs when the public understood what those dogs did, made it harder to euthanize dogs with PTSD when people knew those dogs were warriors suffering from wounds sustained in service, made it harder to hide corruption when a generation of young officers had read about what happens when good people stay silent. Jack did not do book tours, did not appear on talk shows, did not seek fame or recognition. He had spent 40 years in service and 11 years investigating. He had earned the right to be left alone, to live quietly, to let the work speak for itself. But he did agree to one interview, 60 Minutes, the same program that had exposed military scandals for 50 years. They flew a crew to Montana, set up cameras in his small house, spent 3 hours asking questions. The interviewer was tough, professional, asked about the investigation, about how he stayed motivated when everyone told him to quit, about whether he regretted the career lost, the relationships damaged, the years consumed by obsession. Jack answered honestly, said yes, there were bang. But the alternative was letting Cole's murderers walk free, letting corruption continue, letting the next generation of warriors serve under officers who valued profit over honor. Was it worth it, the interviewer asked? Jack thought about Cole, about Kane, about Ghost and Bruno, about Ava carrying forward her father's legacy, about reforms that survived bureaucratic resistance, about truth that could not be buried once it was spoken. Yes, he said, every sacrifice was worth it, every year of investigation, every moment of being called crazy or obsessed or conspiracy theorist, because we proved that even powerful men face consequences when evidence is overwhelming and people refuse to quit. The interview aired on a Sunday night in October, 20 million viewers. The network received more feedback than any segment in 5 years, most of it supportive. Veterans calling in to say thank you for telling this story. Families of fallen soldiers saying they had always suspected corruption but could not prove it. Canine handlers saying they were fighting battles similar to Jack's and his story gave them courage to continue. But some feedback was hostile. Defense contractors angry about implications for their industry. Congressional staffers defending the Pentagon. Active duty officers who felt the book painted military leadership in unfairly negative light. Jack ignored it all. Had learned long ago that you cannot make everyone happy, that standing for something means accepting that others will oppose you. That truth creates enemies because people in power depend on lies to maintain that power. He focused instead on letters from handlers. Young men and women serving with dogs in dangerous places. They wrote about their partners, about bonds that went deeper than training, about animals who had saved their lives and deserved better than they were getting. One letter stood out. From a Marine corporal deployed to Syria, his dog, a Belgian Malinois named Titan, had detected an IED that would have killed 6 Marines. But during the detection, Titan triggered a secondary device, lost both front legs. The corporal had been told Titan would be euthanized, too expensive to provide prosthetics, too difficult to adopt out a disabled military working dog. The corporal wrote, asking if Jack knew any way to save Titan's life. Jack made calls, used connections built over 40 years, found a veteran-owned organization that provided prosthetics for injured military working dogs. They agreed to pay for Titan's treatment, to provide ongoing care, to help the corporal adopt Titan once his deployment ended. Small victory, one dog saved, but it mattered because every individual life matters. Every act of loyalty deserves recognition. Every warrior, human or animal, deserves the honor they earn through service. Jack started doing more of this, connecting handlers with resources, helping dogs find homes after service, pushing for medical care, using his platform, small as it was, to make sure Cole's legacy continued to protect the four-legged warriors who could not protect themselves. 1 year after the book released, Jack received a package. No return address, just a P.O. box in Washington, D.C. Inside was a letter, handwritten, the script shaky but legible. Master Chief Mercer, you do not know me, but I know you. I was one of the senators who voted to restore funding for canine programs. I did so because your book made me ashamed. Ashamed that I had considered those programs expendable. Ashamed that I valued budget numbers over the lives of animals that serve our country. I wanted you to know that your work mattered, that Cole Hartwell's sacrifice mattered, that the reforms are holding because people like you refuse to let us forget why they are necessary. Keep fighting. We need more warriors like you, more people willing to stand up even when it costs them everything. The letter was unsigned, but Jack knew it was real, knew it represented others who had read the book and changed their thinking, who had seen corruption exposed and decided they would rather be part of the solution than part of the problem. That was how change happened, not through grand gestures or dramatic moments, but through accumulation, through story after story, through one person reading truth and deciding to act differently, through small decisions multiplied across thousands of people until the culture shifted and what was once acceptable became unthinkable. Jack put the letter in a box with others he had received, testimonials to the idea that speaking truth matters, that fighting corruption matters, that refusing to stay silent matters even when the fight seems hopeless. On Memorial Day 2028, 4 years after the original dedication, Jack returned to Arlington, to the Canine Memorial where Bruno's name was carved in bronze, where Ghost's name had been added the previous year, where hundreds of dogs were remembered and honored and acknowledged as the warriors they were. Ava met him there. She was 32 now, still a Marine, still a canine handler, but also something more. She had been promoted to gunnery sergeant, had been assigned to oversee canine training programs at Quantico, was teaching the next generation how to treat dogs as partners rather than equipment. She had also started a foundation, Cole's Legacy, dedicated to providing medical care and adoption services for retired military working dogs. The foundation was funded by donations and staffed by volunteers and had saved more than 200 dogs in its first year of operation. "Uncle Jack," she said when she saw him, "you look good. Montana agrees with you." Jack smiled. "Quite agrees with me, but I miss the fight sometimes. You are still fighting, just in different ways. Your book is required reading now. Every canine handler in every branch reads it during training. They learn about my father, about what he stood for, about what happens when warriors have courage." They walked together through Arlington, past endless rows of white headstones, past the graves of men and women who had served and died and earned the right to rest in honored ground, past Cole's grave where the stone now read "Murdered in service to his country. Justice served 2024. Trust the dogs." Jack knelt, placed dog tags on the headstone. Not Bruno's this time, Ghost's, the old warrior finally joining his handler's grave. A reunion delayed by years and death, but accomplished nonetheless. "I finished it, Cole," Jack said quietly. "Your daughter is carrying forward what you started. The reforms are holding. Dogs are being honored. And your story, your sacrifice, it matters. It changed things." Ava knelt beside him, placed her hand on the stone. "Hey, Dad, I brought someone to meet you. Well, not to meet exactly, but to tell you about." She pulled out a photograph, showed it to Jack. A young Marine, maybe 22, standing beside a German Shepherd in tactical vest. "This is Lance Corporal Davis. He just graduated Canine Handler School. Top of his class." When they asked him why he joined the program, he said he read a book about a SEAL named Cole Hartwell. Said he wanted to serve like that, with honor, with courage, with absolute commitment to the warriors fighting beside him. She paused. "Your legacy is not just me, Dad. It is every handler who reads your story and decides to be better, to treat their dogs better, to have the courage to stand up when they see wrong." Jack felt his throat tighten. 4 years since the trials, 4 years since Garrison was sentenced, 4 years since promises were made. And those promises were being kept. Not perfectly, not without setbacks, but better than before. Better than the system that let Cole be murdered and his killers walk free for 11 years. They stayed at the grave until afternoon. Shadows stretched long across Arlington, until other visitors had left and groundskeepers began their rounds, until the only sound was wind through trees and the distant echo of traffic beyond cemetery walls. Walking back to the parking lot, Jack saw other canine handlers visiting the memorial. Young men and women in uniform, dogs at their sides. They stopped, read names, placed flowers. Saluted warriors they had never known, but whose sacrifice made their own service possible. One of them recognized Jack. Approached. "Master Chief Mercer, I just wanted to say thank you for writing the book, for telling the truth, for making sure we remember." Jack nodded. "Thank the dogs. They are the real heroes. We just have to be worthy of their loyalty." The handler smiled, returned to his dog, continued his vigil at the memorial. Ava watched him go. "That is what I am most proud of. Not that we exposed corruption, not that we got justice for my father, but that we changed how people think, how they treat their partners, how they understand what service means. Jack looked at the memorial, at the bronze shepherd standing eternal watch, at the names carved into stone, at the testament to loyalty that transcends species, that connects warriors across generations, that reminds everyone who sees it that some bonds are worth dying for and all bonds are worth honoring. Your father used to say the pack protects the pack. He was right. We protect by serving, by speaking truth, by refusing to let convenience or politics or powerful men determine what is right. We protect by having courage when it is hard and standing up when others stay silent. Ava took his hand. Thank you for protecting me, for teaching me what my father believed, for showing me that one person can make a difference if they refuse to quit. They drove back to their hotel. Tomorrow, Jack would fly back to Montana, back to his small house and quiet life, back to writing the next book, this one about military reform and why institutions resist change and how warriors can push for better even when the system fights them. Ava would return to Quantico, to her training duties, to the endless work of teaching handlers that dogs are not equipment, to building her foundation, to making sure Cole's name remains synonymous, not with murder, but with courage. That night, alone in his hotel room, Jack opened his laptop, checked email, found one from the Marine Corporal in Syria, the one whose dog, Titan, had lost both front legs. Master Chief Mercer. Titan is home. He has prosthetics. He is learning to walk again. It is slow. He falls sometimes. But he keeps trying, and when he succeeds, when he takes 10 steps without falling, he looks at me with this expression, like he is asking if I am proud. And I tell him yes, every time. I am so proud. Thank you for saving him. Thank you for caring about one dog when the system wanted to throw him away. Thank you for showing me that fighting for what is right matters even when the fight seems impossible. Below the message was a photo, Titan standing on prosthetic legs. The dog's expression was alert, proud, ready to serve again even though service had cost him so much. Jack stared at the photo for a long time, thinking about sacrifice, about loyalty, about the debt humans owe to animals who serve without question and deserve honor without qualification. He typed a response. You are doing exactly what your dog needs, what all warriors need, someone to stand by them, someone to believe they are still valuable even when they are broken, someone to fight for them when they cannot fight for themselves. Keep doing that and teach the next generation to do the same. He hit send, closed the laptop, sat in darkness thinking about endings and beginnings, about how one man's death had sparked investigations that exposed corruption, that led to reforms that saved lives, that inspired others to fight their own battles. That was legacy, not monuments or medals, not fame or recognition, but change that rippled outward across years and generations. That turned individual courage into collective transformation. That proved one person could matter if they refused to accept injustice as inevitable. Cole had mattered, had died standing up, had left behind evidence that his friend spent 11 years following to its conclusion, had inspired his daughter to become the warrior he never got to see her become. Kane had mattered, had lived 11 years in guilt before finding redemption through testimony that cost him everything and bought justice. Ghost and Bruno had mattered, had served with absolute loyalty, and died protecting their packs and earned recognition carved in bronze at Arlington. And Jack, in his own way, had mattered too. Not by being exceptional, not by possessing unique skills or resources, but by refusing to quit, by believing truth was worth fighting for even when everyone said he was crazy, by keeping a promise made to a brother who died trusting that someone would finish what he started. The next morning, Jack flew home to Montana, watched the country pass beneath him, farmland and cities and mountains, America in all its complexity, beautiful and broken, worthy of service and in constant need of reform, a place where warriors fought not just foreign enemies, but domestic corruption, where the battle for justice never truly ended because human nature guaranteed that power would always seek to protect itself, but also a place where individuals could matter, where one handler could save a dog, where one investigator could expose conspirators, where one daughter could honor her father by continuing his work, where one book could change how thousands of people thought about loyalty and service, and the cost of staying silent. The plane landed in Missoula. Jack rented a car, drove home through snow that was starting to melt as spring approached. Montana in transition, winter giving way to new growth, death making room for life. His house was exactly as he left it, small, quiet, empty except for memories. He walked to the hillside where Ghost was buried. The snow had melted enough to reveal the stones marking the grave. Jack knelt, placed his hand on cold earth. "You would have liked Arlington," he said to the dog, who could no longer hear. "You would have liked knowing you were honored, that your service mattered, that warriors who come after will remember you." Wind moved through pine trees, carrying the scent of coming spring, of renewal, of seasons turning despite human grief and animal suffering and all the small tragedies that accumulate into lives lived and lost. Jack stood, looked at the valley below, at wilderness unmarked by war, at peace earned through distance and time, and the knowledge that his mission was complete, that he had kept his promise, that Cole's death had not been meaningless. He walked back to his house, made coffee, opened his laptop, started writing the next chapter, the one about what comes after, about how warriors adapt when the fighting ends, about learning to live with peace when your identity was forged in conflict, about how legacy is built not through single acts of heroism, but through consistent commitment to principles larger than self, through teaching the next generation, through refusing to let convenience override conscience, through standing up again and again, even when you are tired and scared and ready to quit. The words came slowly at first, then faster, the story taking shape, the narrative finding its rhythm, the truth demanding to be told. Outside, snow continued to melt. Spring continued to arrive. The world continued to turn. And in a small house in Montana, an old warrior wrote, "Bearing witness, keeping faith, honoring the fallen." Because that is what warriors do. They remember, they fight, they refuse to quit. And when their own service ends, they pass forward what they learned so the next generation can fight better battles with clearer purpose and deeper understanding of what courage costs and why it matters anyway. Jack wrote until sunset, until the valley below was painted gold and shadows stretched long across snow that would soon be gone, until his fingers were tired and his back ached and the day's words were complete. He saved the document, closed the laptop, made dinner, ate alone at the kitchen table that had once seated Ghost but now held only memories and the quiet company of ghosts. That night, before sleep, he pulled out a photograph, old and creased, taken in Grenada 45 years ago. 5 young warriors, Jack and Cole and Kane and Garrison, and one other whose name he had long forgotten. All of them impossibly young, all of them believing they were invincible, all of them about to learn what service costs. 4 of the 5 were dead now, Garrison in prison, but might as well be dead. Kane in a civilian cemetery in Portland. Cole at Arlington with honors finally restored. The 5th warrior, the forgotten one, killed in Panama 5 years after the photo was taken. Only Jack remained, the last survivor of that particular photograph, the last witness to choices made and paths taken in the moment when brothers diverged toward honor or corruption. He put the photo away, turned off the light, lay in darkness listening to wind and silence and the steady tick of a clock marking time that moves always forward and never back. Tomorrow he would write more, would continue telling the story, would make sure the next generation understood what had happened and why it mattered and how to avoid making the same mistakes. Tomorrow he would call Ava, check on the foundation, hear about new dogs saved, new handlers trained, new victories won in the endless battle to treat warriors, human and animal, with the dignity they deserved. Tomorrow he would continue the work, because work continued as long as breath remained, as long as injustice existed, as long as powerful men tried to hide their sins behind classified reports and national security claims. But tonight he rested, honored the fallen, remembered brothers, and trusted that somewhere, somehow, Cole and Kane and Ghost were together, still serving, still protecting, still watching over the pack they had given everything to defend. Trust the dogs, Cole had said. Jack had trusted, had followed that wisdom through 11 years of investigation and 2 years of trials and 4 years of ensuring reforms survived. And the dogs had been right. They always were. They knew who the wolves were. And now, finally, after decades of hunting, the wolves had been found, had been brought to justice, had been removed from the pack. The warriors could rest. The mission was complete. The last handler had finished his watch.